Hi guys, and welcome to the Gentle History Podcast. Tonight we're walking through an English winter in the early 1840s, with snow needling your face, mud clutching at your boots, and a small cottage somewhere ahead promising warmth. The lane is almost lost beneath white drifts. Bare hedges lean and shiver. Wind moves through the branches with a low moan, as though the countryside itself has decided to complain about the weather. You pull your coat tighter, though it is not really winning the argument. A gust slides down your collar. Your fingers ache inside damp gloves, and the darkness beyond the neck's bend feels deeper than it should. You probably will not survive this, at least not with your dignity intact. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And while you settle in, tell me where you are listening from and what the local time is where you are. Now, dim the lights, you keep walking. The track narrows between thorn hedges, their branches glazed with ice. Every few steps, your boot breaks through crusted snow and sinks into cold mud. Somewhere in the dark, a branch snaps. You pause. Nothing follows. Probably a fox. Possibly a falling twig. Almost certainly not a highwayman, though this is not the ideal century for confident assumptions. Ahead, the land rises gently. You can make out the black shape of a field boundary, then the pale blur of another slope. In many parts of England during the 1840s, rural roads remain poorly surfaced, especially away from turnpike routes. Main roads may be maintained through tolls, but small lanes can become rutted, flooded, frozen, or nearly impassable in winter. Travel is slow because the countryside is arranged for carts, livestock, local habit, and patience. You pass a crooked gate. Snow gathers along its top rail. Beyond it, sheep press together near a hedge, their wool dark with damp. They are quiet, conserving warmth, their bodies forming one patient, breathing mass. The smell reaches you through the cold, a mixture of wet fleece, earth, and manure. Life is close by, even if it smells agricultural. The wind comes harder across the open field. You lower your head and follow the faint groove of the lane. Your breath clouds in front of you, briefly hiding the way. There is no street lighting here, no porch lamp, no reflective sign announcing shelter ahead. You depend on memory, moonlight, and perhaps the distant glow of a window. If the household has fuel enough to spare, then you see it. At first it is only a dim amber stain in the darkness, low to the ground and partly hidden by the hedge. You blink snow from your lashes. The light disappears, then returns as the branches shift. A cottage window, small, uneven, and glowing. You move toward it, and the building slowly gathers from the storm. The roof slopes steeply, heavy with snow. It may be thatched beneath the white covering, or tiled with local clay, depending on the county and household means. The walls are low and thick, perhaps built of stone, brick, cob, or timber filled with plaster. Rural cottages vary widely across England. Local materials matter because carrying stone or timber over poor roads is expensive. So houses often rise from whatever the nearby land provides. The chimney is the clearest feature. Smoke streams from it. Though the wind tears the plume sideways, the sight makes you walk faster. Fire means warmth, cooked food, and dry stockings. Eventually, it may also mean smoke in your eyes, soot in your hair, and everything smelling faintly burned by morning. Standards become flexible when your toes feel like carved turnips. You reach ground where footsteps have churned the snow. Bundles of brushwood rest beneath a rough shelter. Beside them sits a modest stack of split logs. Fuel is precious, and not every household can rely on plentiful wood. in some regions. Families burn peat, coal, furs, dried roots, or gathered sticks. The mixture depends on access, cost, custom, and local rules. Here is one of those less dignified truths of rural life. Poor families sometimes collect cowpats, dry them, and burn them where timber is scarce. The fire may glow and the kettle may boil. But the fragrance does not exactly suggest luxury. Picturesque cottage paintings usually leave out the burning manure. You stop beneath the eaves, meltwater taps from the roof edge. The window is close now, its panes small and distorted. Glass is expensive enough that many humble windows remain limited in size, and old panes bend the light into wavering shapes. Through them, you glimpse movement. A shadow crosses the room. Someone lifts an arm. Another figure bends near the fire. Behind you, the storm closes over the lane. Snow sweeps through hedge gaps and smooths the marks of your boots. The countryside seems to erase you almost at once. Winter travel before modern roads and forecasts offers no emergency number, no heated station, no cheerful map declaring that you're nearly there. You simply keep going until a door opens. Historians still argue whether rural cottages of this period should be understood mainly as places of hardship, or as homes shaped by local knowledge and family resilience. The building before you is cramped, smoky, and vulnerable to cold. It is also carefully maintained and filled with habits that help people endure conditions that would send most modern visitors searching for central heating. You place one hand against the outer wall. It feels rough and icy. If the wall is made of cob, a mixture of clay, earth, straw, and small stones, its thickness helps hold warmth once the fire has been burning. Yet no wall can fully defeat a winter gale. Wind searches for cracks around shutters, doors, roof edges, and chimney joints. A cottage is shelter, but never entirely separate from the weather. The door stands beneath a simple hood. It is made of heavy boards, darkened by rain and years of handling. An iron latch catches a faint line of firelight near the threshold. A broom leans against the wall, its twigs stiff with frost. You listen. Inside, the fire cracks, a pot lid rattles softly, voices rise, then fall. Perhaps a child laughs, perhaps someone coughs. You hear the scrape of a stool, the muted thump of wood placed on embers, and the brief rush of flame that follows. These are the ordinary sounds of people keeping warm. You lift your hand toward the latch, then pause as another gust drives snow against your back. Your boots are soaked, your cheeks sting. The cottage smells faintly of smoke even from outside, mixed with wet thatch, damp soil, and something cooking slowly within. For one more moment, you stand between two worlds. Behind you lies the dark road, the frozen hedge, the field where sheep huddle under snow. Before you waits a low room glowing orange, crowded with work, food, fatigue, and human warmth. Then your fingers close around the iron latch. The latch lifts with a dull iron click, and the door pushes inward against packed snow. Warm air meets you first. Though warm is a generous word, it is warmer than the lane, certainly, and at this moment that feels luxurious. Smoke curls beneath the low ceiling. Firelight moves across rough walls. Your eyes adjust slowly as the room breathes in amber and brown. Someone near the hearth turns toward you. A woman pauses with a wooden spoon in her hand. A man looks up from a stool. One boot stretched toward the flames. Two children stare openly. Because privacy is limited here and visitors are far more interesting than supper. You pull the door shut behind you. The storm disappears, though not completely. Wind still presses against the boards and whispers through cracks around the frame. Snow melts from your shoulders and darkens the floor. You stand there dripping like an apologetic pond. The woman gestures you closer to the fire. There is no entrance hall, no separate sitting room, and certainly no tasteful bench where wet guests may arrange themselves. You step directly into the principal room of the household. This is where food is prepared. Clothes are dried, tools are mended, children are watched, stories are told, and tired bodies gather when daylight ends. The ceiling hangs low enough to make you lower your head. Thick beams cross overhead, blackened by years of smoke. Bunches of herbs dangle from pegs, along with onions, a strip of cloth, and something that may once have been a small bouquet but has become a crisp brown memory. The uneven walls are pale with lime wash, though soot darkens them near the fireplace. A table stands near the centre of the room. It is narrow and scarred by knives, bowls, elbows, hot pots, and decades of use. 3 stools and 1 chair surround it. The chair likely belongs to the oldest or most senior person in the household. Because furniture can carry rank even in a room this small, you're offered a stool and you sit carefully, aware that one leg is shorter than the others. The man nods to you. His coat hangs nearby, steaming faintly beside the hearth. His shirt is plain, his hands broad and marked by work. The woman wears a cap over her hair and an apron darkened by smoke and cooking. Their clothes are practical, repaired, and used until the fabric itself seems to remember every winter. A child edges closer to inspect you. Another remains beside the fire, turning a stick in the ash. You notice how everyone shares the same light. There are no private lamps burning in separate rooms. Candles cost money, and even cheap tallow candles can smell unpleasant and burn unevenly. The fire is the brightest object in the house, so activity gathers around it naturally. In many English rural cottages during the 1840s, one main room serves several purposes at once, while sleeping spaces may be tucked into a loft, a small chamber, or even the same room. Cottage plans differ by region and income, but separation of domestic functions is often limited. Modern ideas about having a room for each activity would seem extravagant here. You glance toward the far wall. A narrow opening leads into darkness, perhaps a pantry or tiny sleeping chamber. A ladder rises toward a loft beneath the roof. It looks steep enough to discourage late-night wandering. A curtain hangs from its cord, offering the nearest thing to privacy. It shifts whenever the wind finds a gap in the wall. The smell of the room settles around you. Wood smoke comes first, then stew, damp wool, leather, onions, and the earthy trace of boots near the door. There is also the faint sourness of milk and the warm animal smell of a cat curled beneath the table. The cat opens one eye, decides you're not worth standing for, and returns to sleep. The household speaks in low voices. You catch the rhythm before the meaning. English in the 1840s is full of local accents and dialect words, some strong enough that travellers from another county may struggle to follow. The children may use expressions passed through generations, phrases never written down because no one here has any need to write them. One curious feature of cottage life is the occasional use of small charms tucked near doors, hearths, or roof beams, a worn shoe, a bent pin, or a bundle of herbs might be hidden to guard against bad luck or troublesome spirits. Such practices survive quietly beside church-going and practical sense. People can attend Sunday worship and still prefer not to test what might be lurking near the chimney. The woman takes your wet outer coat and hangs it near the fire, though not too near. Sparks are a constant hazard. Your gloves follow. Steam rises from them in thin threads. Sensation slowly returns to your fingers, first as tingling, then as a deep ache. You hold your hands toward the flames and feel the heat bite at your skin. The children watch with interest. To them, your discomfort is entertainment. One whispers something, the other laughs. You suspect your boots have become the evening performance. A wooden cup is placed on the table, holding perhaps small beer, watered ale, or milk depending on what the household has. Water is used, of course. But wells and streams can be unreliable, and fermented drinks are familiar in daily life. The taste is mild and slightly sour. It is not elegant, but it warms your throat. You look around again and understand how close everything is. The spinning wheel stands near the wall, a basket of mending rests beside the hearth, a knife lies on the table, a cradle, presently empty, occupies a corner. Above it hangs a coat, and above the coat a shelf holds bowls, a Bible, and a chipped cup. Historians continue to debate whether the apparent simplicity of cottage interiors reflects severe poverty, deliberate thrift, or the fact that useful possessions mattered more than decorative ones. A bare room may show hardship. It may also show a life in which objects must earn their place. The room is not silent for a single moment. The fire pops, the pot murmurs, wind presses at the shutter, the cat shifts, a child sniffs. Someone taps ash from a pipe near the hearth. The sounds overlap until they form a kind of domestic weather. Your boots are removed and placed near the door. Cold air touches your stockings. The woman gives you a look that says the floor will survive, but only just. You tuck your feet closer to the fire and try not to appear too pleased. Outside, the storm deepens. Inside, the cottage draws everyone inward. The man moves his stool to make room. The children settle closer together. The woman returns to the pot, stirring slowly as steam rolls upward into the smoky air. You are inside the shelter now, sharing the one room where nearly everything that matters must happen, and the fire at its centre burns steadily enough to hold the night at bay. The fire draws your attention until the rest of the room seems to arrange itself around it. Its light touches every face differently. The woman's hands flash gold as she turns the spoon. The man's cheek falls into shadow beneath the brim of his cap. The children become restless silhouettes at the edge of the glow. Even the cat appears dignified now, stretched beside the warm stones as though it has personally negotiated the weather. You shift closer. The fireplace is broad and deep, built into the wall with a heavy lintel above it. Soot darkens the stone. Iron hooks descend into the heat, supporting a pot that rocks gently whenever the liquid inside moves. A kettle waits nearby. Tongs, a poker, and a small shovel lean within reach. Nothing here is decorative. Every object has work to do in this cottage. The hearth is not merely a source of warmth. It is the household's engine. The room depends on it for cooking. Wet clothes depend on it for drying. Cold fingers depend on it for feeling. Evening work depends on its light. Water can be heated over it. Food preserved near it. Tools repaired beside it. And children comforted in front of it without the fire. Winter becomes not just unpleasant, but dangerous. The warmth also changes the air around your skin. One cheek feels dry while the other catches a cool draft. Your stockings begin to steam faintly, and the damp leather of your boots gives off a smell that the cat appears to consider deeply offensive. You hold your hands out and feel the heat press against your palms while your back remains cool. This uneven warmth is normal. A person near the flames may feel almost roasted, while someone by the door still shivers. The family adjusts constantly, trading places, turning stools, lifting skirts away from sparks, and moving tasks closer to the brightest part of the room. A mainstream fact of domestic life in the 1840s is that fireplaces remained central to cooking and heating in most ordinary homes. Closed iron ranges are becoming more common in some houses, especially where coal is available and household income permits. But many rural cottages still rely on open hearths. The arrangement may appear simple, yet managing it requires skill. You watch the woman move the hanging pot farther from the strongest flame. She does not consult a dial. There is no numbered setting. Heat is judged by sight. sound, smell, and long habit. A brighter flame means one thing. A bed of red embers means another. A pot that murmurs softly is behaving. A pot that begins to spit has opinions. The children know these rules too. One reaches toward the poker, and the woman gives a quiet warning without turning around. The hand withdraws immediately. Fire teaches obedience faster than most lectures. Above the mantel, a few objects rest in the shifting light. There is a candle stub saved for moments when the fire cannot provide enough illumination. A small box may contain matches, though matches in this period are still improving and can be expensive or unreliable. There may also be a tinderbox with flint, steel, and dry material for catching a spark. Starting a fire from nothing is work, which is one reason embers are guarded so carefully overnight. A quirky custom in some households involves borrowing fire from a neighbour when a hearth goes completely cold. Someone may carry a glowing coal or ember home in a shovel or covered container. The exchange is practical, but it can attract superstition in certain communities. Giving away fire on particular days is considered unlucky, as though prosperity itself might leave with the flame. The man reaches forward and adjusts a split piece of wood. Sparks climb the chimney in a brief golden rush. Everyone looks up for a moment. A stray spark can lodge in soot or thatch, so fire is both guardian and threat. The same glow that keeps the household alive can destroy the roof above it. Historians still argue whether the hearth should be viewed chiefly as a symbol of domestic unity, or as a place where exhausting labour was made almost invisible. It gathers the family. Certainly, it also demands constant attention, usually from the people responsible for cooking, cleaning, childcare, and household management. Comfort does not appear by magic. Someone feeds it, tends it, sweeps it, and breathes its smoke. The woman bends to clear ash from one side of the grate. Fine grey dust rises. It settles on the floor, the tools, and probably on you. Ash is not always discarded. It can be used in cleaning, soap making, gardening, or other practical tasks. Even the remains of the fire may have value. Its light also creates the rhythm of the evening. The brightest period comes after fresh fuel is added. Then the room slowly dims as flames settle into embers. Faces become softer. Corners disappear. Conversation lowers. Time is measured not by a glowing clock, but by the condition of the fire. The family knows how long a task may take by how far the embers have fallen. They know when to eat, when to mend, when to prepare bedding, and when to stop talking because the fire is no longer worth feeding for conversation alone. Fuel has a cost, even when gathered rather than purchased. Every extra hour of brightness must be justified. You listen to the layers of sound. Resin snaps inside the wood, the pot bubbles. Iron clicks as it expands in the heat. A small flame whispers along the edge of a log. Wind moves in the chimney with a low hollow note, then fades. The smell is equally layered. There is smoke, certainly, but also hot stone, damp wool, cooked onion, scorched dust, and the faint sweetness released by burning wood. These scents cling to hair and clothing. Tomorrow, even outside, you will carry the cottage with you. You lean back on the uncertain stool and let your feet absorb the warmth. The storm beyond the shutters feels distant now, though it still rattles the frame. The room remains crowded and imperfect, but the fire creates a circle of safety within it. Everything important seems to face inward. The table stands within reach of the heat. The tools hang close to it. The family sits where the light falls. The sleeping places will be arranged according to its fading warmth. Even stories seem likely to begin here, where shadows move and sparks rise. For now, nobody speaks loudly. The household watches the pot, watches the children, watches the flames. You begin to understand that the hearth is not simply part of the cottage. It is the point around which the cottage becomes a home. The flames settle lower, and the man reaches toward the hearth with the patient caution of someone handling a living thing. He takes the poker and presses one glowing piece inward. A small collapse follows. Red embers tumble together. Ash lifts in a soft cloud, and the fire brightens for a moment before calming again. Nothing is wasted. Every coal, stick, and scrap of dry fuel must be placed where it will do the most good. You watch his hands. He knows which pieces will catch quickly, which will smoulder, and which should be saved for later. Fire tending is not a dramatic skill. No one applauds it. Yet the household depends on dozens of small choices made correctly. Beside the hearth stands a shallow basket filled with thin twigs. These are not the thick logs you might imagine in a romantic painting. They are crooked, uneven, and carefully sorted. Some are no thicker than your finger. Others are short lengths of split wood, dry enough to catch but substantial enough to last. The woman lifts one stick, examines it, and sets it back. Too damp. Even indoors, moisture remains the enemy. Wood that has not dried properly produces more smoke and less useful heat. It hisses, blackens, and sends everyone coughing while achieving very little. The children know this sound. One of them imitates it under his breath, earning a look from his mother. Outside, the storm presses against the cottage, but the fuel for tonight has been prepared long before the snow arrived. During milder months, families gather branches, cut brush, stack turf, collect peat, or purchase coal when they can afford it. Winter survival is built from summer effort. In rural districts, rights to gather fallen wood may depend on local custom, tenancy, estate rules, or access to common land. After centuries of enclosure, many poorer households find traditional gathering practices restricted. What once seemed like an ordinary right can become trespass in the eyes of a landowner. This is one well-established feature of 19th century rural life. Fuel poverty is common, and many labouring families spend a significant share of their income or effort securing enough material to cook and keep warm. A cottage may contain a fireplace, but a fireplace without fuel is only a cold hole in the wall. The man rises and crosses to the corner near the door. He lifts a bundle of brushwood tied with cord. Small leaves and flakes of bark fall to the floor. He loosens the knot and selects several dry stems, then returns to the hearth. You notice how the bundle smells, even through the smoke. There is the sharp scent of twig, sap, old leaves, and damp countryside. It carries the hedge indoors. He places the finest stems under a partly burned log. The woman leans closer and gives a gentle breath toward the embers. The glow deepens. A thread of smoke curls upward. Then a pale flame appears, thin as ribbon. Nobody celebrates. This is expected competence. The household may use several kinds of fuel at once. Wood gives flame. Coal, where available, offers longer and hotter burning. Peat smoulders with a distinct earthy smell. Furze and gorse catch quickly but burn fast. Dried roots, crop waste, and even fragments of broken furniture can find their way into the fire when necessity becomes persuasive. There is an odd little detail recorded in some regions. People sometimes burn nutshells, dried apple wood, or aromatic plants during special evenings, believing the sound, scent, or direction of the smoke might reveal luck for the coming year. Fire becomes a tool for warmth and, with very little encouragement, a household fortune teller. The children shift closer as the new flames strengthen. One holds out both hands, the other turns sideways, warming first one shoulder and then the other. You do the same. There is no shame in rotating like a joint of meat when the weather outside is trying to freeze you. A gust roars down the chimney. Smoke pushes briefly into the room. Everyone blinks. The woman pulls the pot aside. The man watches the chimney opening until the draft corrects itself. Airflow is temperamental. Wind direction chimney height, soot build-up, room ventilation, and the state of the fire all influence whether smoke rises properly or chooses to visit the family. Experts continue to disagree about how often rural households allowed their fires to die completely overnight. Fuel scarcity encouraged careful rationing. Yet restarting a fire in the morning could be difficult. Practice probably varied with region, season, household means, and access to neighbours. Tonight. The intention is clear: the fire must last. The man uses the poker to gather the embers into a compact bed. Spreading them would cool them quickly. Clustering them preserves heat. Later, ash may be drawn over the remaining coals to slow their burning. By morning, someone may uncover a faint red glow and coax it back to life. The process is called banking the fire in some households. It is less like putting the fire to sleep and more like persuading it not to die while everyone else rests. A small iron guard stands near one edge of the hearth, though it would not satisfy modern ideas of safety. Sparks still leap. Children still sit close. Clothing can still brush the flame. The household relies on attention, habit, and repeated warnings. The woman moves the basket farther from the heat. Dry twigs are useful, but a basket of dry twigs beside an open fire has obvious ambitions. You hear another branch scrape across the roof. Snow slides from the eaves with a heavy sigh. The cottage seems surrounded by cold, yet each piece of fuel creates a small refusal. The family does not burn wood carelessly. A thick log placed too soon may smother the flame. Too many sticks at once create fierce heat and waste. Too little fuel leaves the pot cooling and the room damp. The fire is adjusted according to need. Cooking requires one sort of heat. Drying clothes requires another. Preparing for sleep means letting the flames decline without losing the embers entirely. You begin to notice that everyone watches the fuel level without appearing to do so. The woman glances at the basket when she passes. The man judges the log by its shape. The oldest child retrieves a fallen twig and returns it to the pile. Such habits reveal the quiet mathematics of scarcity. There is enough for tonight. Perhaps. Enough for the morning. Probably. Enough for the rest of the week depends on the weather, the condition of the lane, and whether more fuel can be gathered or bought. The fire crackles more steadily now. The fresh sticks have caught. A split log begins to glow along one edge. Heat spreads toward your knees, and your damp stockings finally feel almost dry. The man returns the poker to its place. The woman draws the pot toward the stronger heat. The children settle again, reassured by the brighter light. For a while. The cottage seems to breathe with the fire. Flame rises, shadows retreat. The storm answers from outside, but the hearth holds. Not through abundance, through preparation, skill, and the careful guarding of every ember. The woman draws the iron pot closer to the heart of the fire, and the room seems to lean toward it. Steam gathers beneath the low ceiling. The smell that has been waiting patiently in the background now becomes impossible to ignore. Onion, barley, perhaps a little bacon, and the deep earthy sweetness of root vegetables drift through the smoke. Your stomach answers with a quiet complaint. The children notice. One looks at you, then at the pot, as though wondering whether a visitor means smaller portions. This is a reasonable concern. Hospitality may be expected, but the contents of an iron pot do not expand merely because good manners require them to. The woman lifts the lid with a folded cloth. A cloud of steam rolls across her face. She turns her head, waits for it to clear, then stirs slowly from the bottom. The spoon scrapes against iron with a dull, steady sound. What simmers there is not elegant, but elegance has little nutritional value. A cottage supper often depends on whatever can be made filling, warm and economical. Potatoes, where commonly grown and accepted, offer bulk, barley or oats may thicken broth. Cabbage, onions, carrots, turnips, peas, and beans appear according to season and local habit. A scrap of salted pork can flavour an entire pot even when there is not enough meat to give everyone a satisfying piece. One familiar truth of working households in 19th century England is that meat is not necessarily eaten in generous portions every day. Rural labouring families may keep pigs, poultry, or other animals, but much depends on wages, land access, household size, and local prices. Meat can be saved for particular days, preserved carefully, or used in small amounts to strengthen dishes based mainly on grain and vegetables. The man reaches for a loaf resting on the shelf. It is dense, dark, and already cut. The crust looks firm enough to defend itself. Bread is central to the diet, but its quality varies greatly. Wheat bread carries social prestige, while families in some regions rely more heavily on barley, oats, rye, or mixtures of grains. Flour may also be stretched when prices rise or wages fall. He sets the loaf on the table and uses a knife to cut thick slices. Crumbs scatter into the grooves of the wood. One child immediately gathers a loose piece with a wet fingertip. Nothing edible remains lonely for long. The bowls are simple, two are wooden, one is coarse earthenware, and another bears a crack repaired with care. The best bowl is not offered to you. It belongs to someone who has earned it through age, habit, or ownership. And you receive a wooden one that smells faintly of every meal it has ever held. The woman begins serving. She gives each bowl a ladle of broth, then another portion of vegetables and grain. Her movements are measured. She's not counting aloud, but she knows exactly how much remains. The smallest child receives a little less. The man receives more. Your bowl is respectable, though you suspect the woman has quietly reduced her own portion to make it so. You wrap your hands around the wood. Heat soaks into your fingers. The steam carries the scent of pepper, though perhaps there is none. More likely you are smelling onion, herbs, and smoke together. Imported spices exist, certainly, but they may be too expensive for this household to use freely. Salt is more important. It flavours food, but it also preserves it. Meat can be salted or brined. Fish may be dried, smoked, or pickled. Fruit can become jam if enough sugar is available. Though sugar still represents a significant expense for many poorer families, apples may be stored in lofts or cool spaces. Beans and peas can be dried. Cabbage and roots survive in clamps, pits, sheds, or cellars when conditions are suitable. Preservation is not a hobby here. It is the difference between eating through winter and discovering that January has arrived with excellent timing and no vegetables. You taste the stew. It is hot enough to punish impatience. You pull the spoon away and wait. One child watches you with obvious satisfaction. Apparently, burning your tongue is the second performance of the evening. When you try again, the broth is mild but comforting. Barley has softened until it thickens a liquid. The onion has nearly dissolved. A small piece of meat appears in your bowl, no larger than the end of your thumb. It tastes intensely salty and smoky. The woman adds hot water to the pot after serving. This is not because the recipe demands it. The remaining stew may become tomorrow's breakfast or midday meal, and extra liquid helps it travel farther. More barley can be added later. Another onion may join it. Yesterday's dish becomes today's base and tomorrow's possibility. There is a curious household practice sometimes associated with long simmering pots. In certain homes, ingredients are added over several days, so the contents change gradually without the vessel being completely emptied. Stories about pots simmering for years are usually exaggerated, but the idea reflects a real habit of extending broth and reusing flavour. You glance into the pot and decide not to ask how old the oldest onion might be. Researchers remain divided over how nutritionally poor the rural labouring diet was across different English regions. Some evidence describes severe shortages and monotonous meals, particularly where wages are low and families are large. Other records suggest that gardens, gleaning, livestock, dairy produce, and local exchange sometimes provide more variety than wage figures alone imply. The answer changes from village to village, household to household, and season to season. Tonight, there is enough. The man dips bread into his bowl. The crust softens immediately. Children do the same, using each piece to collect every trace of broth. Spoons are useful, but bread performs several tasks at once and can be eaten afterward, which gives it a clear advantage over cutlery. Conversation remains quiet while everyone eats. Hunger does not encourage unnecessary speeches. The fire clicks and settles. Outside, the wind pushes snow against the shutters in soft bursts. Inside, spoons touch bowls. Someone breathes across hot broth. The cat emerges from beneath the table and begins a slow inspection of the floor. It finds nothing. The household is too careful for that. Even bones may be boiled for stock, fat can be saved. Drippings may flavour bread or vegetables, stale crusts can be softened in liquid. Milk approaching sourness can still become useful in cooking. The boundary between fresh and spoiled is judged with experience rather than printed dates. The woman finally sits. Her bowl contains more broth than solids. Just as you suspected, she eats without complaint. Though she watches the children between every few spoonfuls, you understand that stretching food is not simply adding water, it is planning portions, preserving seasonal abundance, saving scraps, knowing which ingredients satisfy hunger, and refusing waste without making the meal feel like punishment. The man offers you another piece of bread. You accept. Because refusing might seem polite but would also be foolish. The loaf is coarse and slightly sour. It becomes better when dipped into the stew. Smoke, grain, onion, and salt blend into something plain and deeply welcome. Your feet are warm now. Your coat continues to steam near the hearth. The room feels smaller as everyone gathers around the table, yet the closeness is no longer uncomfortable. The pot rests above the coals, still holding enough for another meal if handled carefully. No grand feast has taken place. There is no shining silver, no delicate pastry, no servant arriving with a second course. There is only an iron pot, a hard loaf, a few winter vegetables, and the practiced skill of making modest food carry an entire household through the storm. The last spoonfuls disappear, and the bowls are set aside with the quiet efficiency of people who know that evening still contains work. Your coat hangs near the hearth, heavy with melted snow. Drops gather along the hem and fall onto the stone floor. Each one makes a faint dark mark before the heat begins to lift it away. Your gloves rest on a wooden rail, fingers spread stiffly, as though they have been startled by something. The woman rises and moves them farther from the flame. Too close, and damp wool may scorch, leather can stiffen, crack, or shrink. A garment dried carelessly may survive the storm only to be ruined by the fire meant to save it. Warmth requires patience, which is unfortunate because your toes would prefer immediate miracles. Your stockings feel less wet now, though not exactly comfortable. They cling to your feet with the stubborn intimacy of cold cloth. You stretch your legs toward the glow and watch steam drift upward in pale threads. Around the room, clothing occupies nearly every useful surface. A shirt hangs from a peg near the chimney breast. A child's small garment lies across the back of the chair. The man's outer coat is spread open so the lining can dry. An apron waits beside the hearth, marked with flour, soot, and the faint history of several meals. Nothing looks new. Sleeves bear patches at the elbows. Stockings show careful darning. A jacket has been repaired with cloth that almost matches, though not quite. In the soft firelight, the differences blend together. In daylight, every repair would be visible. For working families in the 1840s, clothing represents a considerable investment. Cloth requires fibre, labour, skill, and money. Even when garments are made at home or acquired second-hand, they are expected to last. Clothes pass between siblings, change owners, and continue serving long after their original shape has softened. You touch the edge of your coat. The outer fabric is rough beneath your fingers. Wool is valued because it retains warmth even when damp. Though wet wool becomes heavy and carries a powerful smell, that scent now fills the space around the hearth. It mixes with smoke, stew, leather, and human bodies until the cottage develops its own weather. The children do not seem troubled by it. They are accustomed to garments drying beside the fire, boots steaming by the door, and the smell of damp fabric following everyone indoors. Cleanliness matters, but laundry in winter is difficult. Water must be carried, heated, and used carefully. Washing large garments takes effort, and drying them during wet weather may fill the room with moisture for hours. The woman lifts a shirt and tests the cloth between finger and thumb, still damp. She turns it so another side faces the heat. The action is simple, but it is repeated again and again through the evening. Clothes do not dry evenly in front of an open fire. One sleeve becomes warm while the other remains cold. The front dries while the back gathers moisture. Every item must be shifted and watched. A familiar feature of 19th century rural dress is the importance of layering. A linen or cotton shirt may sit beneath a woolen waistcoat, jacket, shawl, cloak, or coat. Women commonly wear shifts, petticoats, gowns, aprons, caps, and shawls according to means and circumstance. The exact combination varies with region, occupation, age, and season. Fashion still reaches the countryside, though slowly and unevenly. A sleeve shape, bonnet style, or choice of colour may echo wealthier society, but practical needs reshape everything. Mud, labour, childbirth, weather, and limited money are powerful editors. A garment must allow movement, survive repeated repair, and remain useful after fashion has become bored with it. The man removes one stocking and holds it toward the fire. A hole is opened near the heel. He examines it without surprise and passes it to the woman. She places it beside the mending basket, where several other small disasters are waiting, tomorrow, or perhaps later tonight. Wool thread will close the gap. The repaired area may feel thicker underfoot, but discomfort is preferable to frost. One curious belief connected with clothing appears in scattered traditions across Britain. Some people avoid mending a garment while it is still being worn, fearing that stitching cloth around a person may somehow stitch away memory, luck, or freedom. Practical households may ignore such warnings, though it is easy to imagine a child sitting very still while a sleeve is repaired and being told that any foolishness afterward is the needle's fault. You glance at the children. One has begun picking at a loose thread. The woman notices without looking directly at him. His hand drops. Clothing also reveals position within the household and community. A clean cap, a well-kept apron, polished shoes, or a carefully brushed coat can communicate respectability even when the fabric is old. Sunday clothes may be preserved separately from working garments. They are worn to church, funerals, visits, and occasions when appearance carries particular weight. Respectability is not the same as wealth. A poor household may devote extraordinary labour to keeping garments neat because clothing affects how neighbours, employers, clergy, and officials judge the family. A torn sleeve can be repaired, a stained collar can be washed. A brushed coat may signal discipline and self-respect even when its lining is nearly gone. Social historians continue to question how much ordinary rural people use clothing to express personal identity rather than simply meeting practical needs. inventories, and surviving garments reveal materials and values, but they rarely capture private feelings. A woman may treasure a ribbon because it is beautiful. A man may keep an old coat because it belonged to his father. A child may hate a handed-down garment despite everyone insisting it has years left in it. Objects carry emotion quietly. The woman opens the mending basket. Inside are thread cards, scraps of cloth, needles, buttons, and pieces saved from garments too worn to repair. Nothing is thrown away until every useful part has been removed. A sound button survives the shirt that once held it. A strip of wool becomes a patch. Linen worn thin may become a cleaning cloth. You notice a small bundle of fabric tied with string. It contains scraps sorted by type and colour. Some are so tiny that a modern person might discard them without thought. Here, they remain potential solutions. The fire brightens as a piece of wood shifts inward. Orange light passes through the steam rising from your coat. The cloth seems almost alive, breathing out the storm it absorbed on the lane. You can smell wet earth from the hem and smoke entering the fibres. By morning, the garment will carry both journeys. The cold outside has marked it with damp. The cottage will mark it with soot. You begin to understand why people and places can often be identified by scent before they are clearly seen. A farm worker may smell of animals and soil. A household using peat carries a different smoke from one burning coal. A washerwoman bears soap and wet cloth. A cottage resident may carry the hearth wherever they go. The woman returns your gloves. They are warm, though still slightly damp at the fingertips. You pull them on and immediately regret it. The inside feels clammy. The children laugh. Your dignity, already weakened on the road, now expires beside the fireplace. You remove the gloves and place them back on the rail. This time, you copy the woman's method and spread them carefully, rather than dropping them in a heap. She gives the smallest nod, which feels like passing an examination. The room settles again. Clothes hang in the glow, needles wait in the basket, patches, seams, and darned heels reveal years of care. Every garment carries evidence of labour, not only from the person who wears it, but from the hands that wash, dry, turn, brush, mend, and preserve it. Outside, snow continues to fall. Inside, the household keeps winter from entering one sleeve at a time. The mending basket remains open beside the hearth, and the woman draws it closer with one foot. There is no announcement that work is beginning again. It simply resumes. The bowls may be empty, the road outside may have vanished beneath snow, and the children may be blinking more slowly. But evening is not yet finished. Darkness changes the kind of work being done. It does not end it. The woman selects the stocking with the worn heel. She threads a needle, holds the wool close to the firelight, and narrows her eyes. The flame trembles. Her shadow moves across the wall, larger than she is, bending and straightening with every motion of her hand. You watch the needle enter the cloth. The hole is not closed by pulling the torn edges together. That would create a hard ridge and make the stocking uncomfortable. Instead, she builds a small woven patch directly across the gap, passing the thread one way, then the other. It is careful work, slow enough to seem almost restful until you remember how many stockings a family can damage in winter. Beside her, the man takes up a wooden handle and a small knife. Perhaps the handle belongs to a spoon, a tool, or some object used in the fields. One side has split. He turns it in his fingers, testing the grain, then begins shaving away the damaged wood. Thin curls fall onto his knee. Firelight is not ideal for close work. It flickers, throws deep shadows, and changes direction without warning. Still, candles are not burned casually. A rushlight may provide a cheaper alternative in some households, made by dipping the pith of a rush plant into animal fat. Its flame is small and can require frequent attention, but it offers a little extra light when the fire is too low. Across much of rural England, winter evenings remain important hours for domestic production and repair. Clothing is mended, yarn is spun, tools are maintained, baskets are patched, food is prepared for the next day, and small household goods are made or restored. The boundary between working time and resting time is far less definite than it may seem from a comfortable chair in a modern home. The older child carries a stool toward the spinning wheel. The wheel has waited against the wall all evening, its rim catching the firelight whenever the flames rise. The child sits beside it, while the woman continues with the stocking. A bundle of prepared fibre lies nearby. Perhaps wool that has already been cleaned and carded. The wheel turns. At first the sound is faint, a soft wooden murmur. Then it settles into rhythm. The foot works the treadle. The wheel spins. Fibre twists into thread beneath careful fingers. The action looks simple only because it has been repeated so often. You try to follow the movement and quickly lose track. The child draws the fibre out, lets the twist travel along it, then winds the new yarn onto the spindle. Too much tension, and the thread breaks. Too little, and it forms uneven lumps. Every few moments. The fingers pause to correct a weakness. A small basket near the wheel contains bits of wool that look almost useless. They are not. Short fibres can still become stuffing, rough yarn, or part of another task. Waste is merely material that has not yet found its second occupation. The younger child sits on the floor with a handful of feathers. These may have been saved from poultry and now need sorting. The finest down can be used for bedding, while larger feathers may serve other purposes. One feather escapes, catches the warm air, and floats toward the hearth. The child grabs it just before it reaches the flame. Everyone watches. The child gives a solemn nod, pretending this was always the plan. A rather charming oddity appears in accounts of household labour. In some places, children learning to spin are warned that lazy or uneven work might attract mischievous spirits associated with distaffs and wheels. Whether such tales are sincerely believed or simply used to keep young hands moving is difficult to know. Either way, supernatural management has one advantage over ordinary scolding. A ghost does not become tired of repeating itself. The man continues carving. The knife whispers against the wood. He pauses, runs his thumb over the surface, and removes another thin shaving. Repairing a tool can save the expense of replacement and prevent delay during work outside. A loose handle, cracked peg, or broken basket may seem minor until the household needs it at dawn. You notice that conversation comes in pieces. The woman asks about the wood. The man answers with 3 words. The child at the wheel complains about a knot in the fibre. Someone coughs. Then silence returns, though it is never complete. Thread slides, wood scrapes, the wheel turns, the fire settles with a sigh. Researchers have not reached full agreement on whether evening cottage work should be understood mainly as economic necessity or as a social practice that also created companionship and shared identity. Much of it is clearly required. Clothes must be repaired and tools kept useful. Yet the work also brings people together in one pool of light, where skills pass from hand to hand and stories can travel alongside them. The woman gives the stocking to the older child for inspection. A finger presses against the repaired heel from inside. The woven patch holds. The child nods, then receives another damaged item from the basket. Instruction happens without a lesson. No one says that this is education. There is no blackboard, timetable, or certificate. The child simply watches, copies, fails, tries again, and eventually becomes useful. Knowledge enters through repetition. Near the wall, a small bundle of straw waits to be tied into a brush. The man finishes smoothing the wooden handle, then fits it into a metal socket. He twists it once, checks the alignment, and sets the repaired tool beside the door. One task ends, another appears. He reaches for a length of cord that has begun to fray, rather than discard it. He separates the fibres and begins twisting them back together. His hands move with the same calm certainty as the woman's needle. You find yourself growing sleepy while watching them. The work has a rhythm that asks nothing of you. The wheel turns, the needle rises and falls, the cord tightens between rough fingers. Firelight glides across familiar objects and disappears. A modern evening often invites entertainment, distraction, or deliberate relaxation. Here, rest is woven into useful activity. Hands continue while voices soften. The body remains occupied even as the mind begins to loosen. The younger child leans against the woman's skirt. She keeps sewing. The child's eyes close for a moment, then open again. A feather remains clutched in one fist. The battle against sleep is brave, unnecessary, and already lost. The woman hums under her breath. The tune is quiet enough that you cannot follow it. Perhaps it is a hymn, a local song, or merely a pattern of notes that helps her count stitches. The wheel seems to join it. The fire adds a low crackle. Wind moves behind the shutter like distant surf. The room is full of labour, yet nothing feels hurried. Each action belongs to the next day. The stocking will be worn, the yarn will become cloth or be sold. The repaired handle will return to use. The sorted feathers will warm someone later. Darkness has not stopped the household. It has drawn everyone closer, placed their work within the same circle of firelight, and turned necessity into a quiet evening rhythm that carries the cottage towards sleep. The spinning wheel slows, and in the space left behind, the storm becomes louder. Rain strikes the shutter in quick silver taps, though much of it turns to sleet before reaching the ground. The cottage receives each gust as a full body blow. Timber creaks. The door gives a small inward shudder. Somewhere above you, snow slides along the roof with a dry, dragging sound. You look toward the window. The shutter is closed tight, yet a thin line of cold air finds its way around the edge. The candle stub on the mantel trembles even though it is not lit. A strip of hanging cloth stirs. The room feels sheltered, but never sealed. Outside, the wind moves through the hedge like a hand through coarse hair. Branches scrape one another, now and then. A twig strikes the wall and skitters away into darkness. The sound is sharp enough to make the younger child lift his head. No one else reacts. They know the ordinary language of winter. A branch against the roof means one thing, a loose shutter means another. Rain entering the chimney has its own sound, as does ice forming beneath the eaves. The household has spent enough nights here to recognize each voice. Another gust arrives. It rushes across the chimney top and pulls at the fire below. Flames bend suddenly toward the room, then straighten. Smoke curls lower before the draft recovers. The man glances upward, listening. Chimneys can sing in bad weather. The air moving through a narrow flue may hum, whistle, moan, or produce a deep pulsing note. To a tired visitor, it can sound almost human. To the family, it is merely the chimney complaining again. You hear it now. A low tone rises above the fire, soft at first, then stronger. It swells until the whole hearth seems to breathe. The children look toward the dark opening. The woman continues sewing. Though her needle pauses for half a second, the note fades. You decide not to ask what stories are told about that sound in rural England during the 19th century. Severe weather can isolate small communities for days. Roads turn to mud, rivers rise, bridges become unsafe, and snow blocks lanes that are already difficult in good conditions. For labouring households, this is not only inconvenient, it can interrupt wages, delay food, prevent medical help, and keep fuel from arriving. The storm beyond the cottage is therefore more than atmosphere. It is a practical force. The man rises and checks the door latch. He presses his palm against the boards, feeling the movement. Then he wedges a short piece of wood near the bottom. The door settles more firmly into its frame. Cold air still enters beneath it. A rolled cloth lies along the threshold to reduce the draught. It is dark with mud and dampness, but it performs its duty. Every small barrier matters. The woman gestures toward the children, and they pull their stools closer to the hearth. The room tightens around the heat. You shift as well, turning your back away from the door. The shutters rattle again. Glass windows exist here, but glass does not guarantee comfort. Small panes may sit loosely in lead or wooden frames. Putty can crack. Wind pushes through gaps. Condensation gathers inside and runs down toward the sill in the morning. A thin skin of ice may appear on the inner surface. For now, the shutter takes most of the storm. Its hinges squeak with each gust. The sound repeats until it becomes part of the room, like a clock with poor manners. From somewhere outside comes a long animal cry. You sit straighter. The man does not. It may be a fox. It may be a dog from another cottage. It may be a sheep separated from the flock. Rural darkness is crowded with voices that modern streets often silence beneath engines and electric light. A barn owl calls from beyond the field. The sound floats through the storm, pale and strange. The younger child moves closer to the woman. She places one hand briefly on his shoulder without looking up from her sewing. There is an old belief in parts of Britain that certain owl calls warn of death, misfortune, or approaching change. Such ideas vary greatly from place to place, and many people treat them as tales rather than truth. Still, when an owl cries over a dark winter field and the chimney answers from above, even a sensible person may decide that superstition deserves a respectful hearing. You tell yourself it is only a bird. The bird does not sound persuaded. The animals near the cottage also respond to the weather. Sheep press into the shelter of hedges. Cattle turn away from the wind. Horses lower their heads. Chickens retreat early to their roosts. A dog may curl close to the door, ready to bark at any unfamiliar movement. Here, the cat remains beneath the table. Though one ear turns toward every loud noise, the fire pops. At once, the cat opens both eyes, confirms that nothing edible has fallen, and closes them again. Experts continue to dispute how accurately written accounts of 19th century storms reflect the experience of ordinary rural families. Newspapers tend to record exceptional damage, dramatic rescues, blocked roads, lost livestock, and collapsed buildings. Daily discomfort leaves fewer traces. A freezing room, a leaking roof, or a missed day of wages may never appear in any official record. Yet those smaller hardships shape the night more intimately than distant disaster. Water finds a path beneath the window frame. The woman notices a dark line forming on the wall. She places a rag along the sill, pressing it into the gap. The cloth drinks slowly. Tomorrow it will need drying, along with everything else. A heavier impact lands against the roof. Everyone looks upward. There is a pause. Then comes a soft rush as snow slides down the slope and drops beside the wall. The cottage beams settle again. No tile has broken. No thatch has torn loose. The man returns to his stool. You release a breath you had not realized you were holding. Storms change how people listen. Every sound becomes a question. Is the chimney secure? Has the latch moved? Is that water entering? Was that an animal? A traveller? Or only the hedge? The family answers through experience. They do not leap at every noise, but neither do they ignore the house. Shelter survives because someone pays attention. The chimney begins its low song again. This time, the woman hums beneath it. Her tune follows another path, steady and human. The two sounds overlap without meeting. Wind above, fire below, a quiet voice between them. You sit within that arrangement, hearing weather press against wood, stone, glass, and thatch. The cottage does not defeat the storm. It negotiates with it. A little cold enters, a little smoke returns, a little water slips beneath the sill. But the walls remain standing, the shutters remain closed, and the fire continues to glow. Beyond them, winter moves through the fields in darkness. Within them, every creak, scrape, cry, and whistle becomes part of the long conversation between the household and the night. The woman's humming fades, but the chimney keeps its low, uncertain voice. For a few moments, no one speaks. The storm fills the silence with sleet against the shutter and wind circling the roof. Then the older child looks toward the dark mouth of the fireplace and asks a question too softly for you to catch. The man smiles, not broadly, just enough to suggest that the question has been asked before. He sets aside the cord he's been repairing and leans back on the stool. The younger child raises his head from the woman's skirt. Even the spinning wheel seems to wait. A story is coming. It begins with a traveller on a winter road. Though perhaps the man says shepherd, poacher, carter, or foolish young farmer. Local tales change easily. The names shift. The village moves. The warning remains. The traveller sees a light across the fields and follows it, believing it comes from a cottage window each time he approaches. The light moves farther away. It leads him over a stile, through a marshy hollow, and toward water hidden beneath reeds. Only when a church bell sounds in the distance does the wandering flame disappear. The children know the ending. One whispers it just before the man reaches it. The light was not a lantern. It was something less friendly. Stories of wandering lights appear across Britain, often connected with marshes, lonely roads, buried treasure, spirits, or travellers led astray. Natural explanations include gases, distant lamps distorted by mist, and reflections over wet ground, yet on a dark night. When paths vanish beneath snow, and no one carries a reliable map, the supernatural explanation may feel almost practical. Do not follow strange lights. That is useful advice whether the light belongs to a spirit or a neighbour who's become badly lost. The man continues. Now the story concerns a black dog seen near a crossroads. It walks beside travellers without making a sound. Some versions treat such creatures as warnings. Others describe them as guardians. In one telling, the dog protects a child from danger, then disappears before dawn. In another, merely seeing it promises misfortune. The younger child pulls his feet beneath the stool. The cat opens one eye again, perhaps offended that a dog has taken the leading role. Belief in omens, spirits, charms, and protective customs remains common in many 19th century communities, even as churches, schools, newspapers, and scientific ideas shape public life. People do not divide the world neatly into rational and irrational categories. A farmer may understand weather signs, animal behaviour, and soil conditions with remarkable accuracy, while also avoiding a path associated with ghosts. Experience and belief sit beside one another. Much like you and the man beside the fire, the woman places another stitch in the stocking. She adds a correction to the story. Apparently, the black dog appears near an ash tree, not the crossroads. The man disagrees. A quiet argument begins over details that neither of them claims to believe. This is how folklore survives. People dismiss it while carefully preserving the correct version. Near the mantel, A small sprig of dried plant hangs from a peg. It may be rowan, hawthorn, rosemary, or another plant given protective meaning in local custom. Branches, berries, iron objects, horseshoes, pins, and marked stones can all become household safeguards. Their purpose may be explained as habit, luck, tradition, or something better left unspoken. An iron object near a threshold is sometimes thought to discourage harmful spirits or witches. Iron already carries practical value and symbolic force. It shapes tools, locks doors, holds hinges, and cuts into earth. A bent nail tucked near an entrance may therefore seem to defend the household in more than one way. One curious custom involves placing shoes within walls, chimneys, or roof spaces during building or repair. Old shoes have been discovered in concealed places across Britain. Some may have been hidden as protective objects, perhaps because a worn shoe carries the shape and presence of its owner. Others may have been placed there for reasons now impossible to recover. You glance toward the ceiling beams. There could be an ancient shoe above you at this very moment. This is not comforting, though it is still better than an ancient foot. The older child asks whether witches can enter through the chimney. The woman answers before the man can turn the question into another long tale. She says that smoke, fire, and sensible behaviour are protection enough. Then she checks the chimney opening, just briefly. The hearth has long been associated with both safety and vulnerability. It is the warm centre of the home, but it is also an opening to the outside world. Smoke rises through it, wind descends through it, birds may nest above it, sparks escape, strange noises form in the flue. Naturally, stories gather there. Some households avoid sweeping all the ash away at certain times, believing that marks found in it may reveal signs about visitors, luck, or future events. A footprint shaped in ash might be read as someone arriving or departing. The practical result is that children become deeply interested in staring at dirt. The younger child leans toward the hearth. The woman pulls him back by the sleeve. Folklore has limits, and one of them is singed eyebrows. Researchers remain divided on how literally rural families hold such beliefs. Written collections often come from clergy, antiquarians, educated visitors, or later folklorists. Their accounts may exaggerate the strangeness of village customs or remove jokes, doubt, and everyday context. A tale told for amusement can look like firm belief once written on a page. Here, beside the fire, certainty feels unnecessary. The man may not believe in wandering lights, yet he would not follow one into a marsh. The woman may dismiss chimney spirits, yet she keeps the dried sprig near the mantel. The children may laugh at the black dog, yet neither wishes to meet it tonight. You understand them, outside. The barn owl calls once more. Nobody comments. The man begins another tale, this one about a hidden treasure that can be found only when the church clock strikes midnight and the seeker walks backward around an old tree. The treasure is guarded by something unnamed. The directions are precise enough to sound trustworthy and foolish enough to guarantee disaster. The older child asks why anyone would walk backward in the dark. The man says greed. The woman says stupidity. Both answers seem historically reliable. The story ends with the treasure seeker returning home covered in mud, carrying nothing but one broken buckle. The children laugh, and the room loosens again. Fear becomes comedy. The storm loses some of its authority. That may be one purpose of these tales. They give shape to darkness. A strange light becomes a warning. A dangerous road gains a guardian. A chimney noise becomes a visitor from another world rather than an unexplained threat. Stories make uncertainty familiar enough to discuss. They also teach. Do not wander into marshes. Respect crossroads. Come home before dark. Keep away from deep water. Listen when older people tell you the weather is turning. The supernatural wrapping makes the advice easier to remember. The fire burns lower while voices continue. One tale leads into another. A neighbour once heard knocking beneath the floor. A farmer saw a hare that vanished beside a wall. A bell rang when no hand touched the rope. Perhaps none of it happened. Perhaps part of it did. In the cottage. Truth is not the only measure of a good story. A tale must hold attention, carry a warning, honour local memory, and last until the next task is finished. The woman ties off the thread. The repaired stocking rests in her lap. The children settle closer, listening as the man lowers his voice. Beyond the shutters, winter remains dark and trackless. Within the firelight, every shadow has a name. Every sound can become a story. And every old warning helps the household feel that the night, however strange, has been lived through before. The man's voice lowers until the final ghostly warning becomes little more than breath. The children remain awake, though only technically. The younger one still leans against the woman's skirt, his head slipping farther sideways whenever his eyes close. Each time he wakes, he straightens with great determination, as if sleep has attempted a personal insult. The older child is doing better, a little. She sits near the spinning wheel with one hand resting on the rim. Firelight glows along her cheek. The loose fibres in her lap have been forgotten. But she continues listening as though another black dog might appear in the tale at any moment. Childhood in this cottage is not separated neatly from adult life. The children eat beside their parents, work near them, listen to their conversations, and sleep within hearing of every cough, argument, prayer, and snore. There is no bright nursery waiting beyond the wall, no room filled only with toys, no careful schedule announcing that play has ended and respectable bedtime has begun. Instead, childhood unfolds inside the household's daily labour. The younger child opens his fist. The feather he was sorting earlier is still trapped inside. It has become bent and warm from his grip. He studies it with a grave expression, then brushes it across the cat's back. The cat tolerates this once. The second attempt receives a sharp turn of the head. The child withdraws the feather and looks offended. Another valuable lesson has been delivered without the need for schooling. Play often grows from whatever lies nearby. A scrap of cloth becomes a doll, a stick becomes a horse, sword, plough, or royal staff depending on the mood of the moment. Pebbles serve as counters. Buttons become treasure. A hoop, spinning top, ball, whistle, or carved animal may be deeply prized. But many games require no purchased object at all. The older child takes the feather and holds it above the rising heat. Warm air lifts it from her fingers, it floats upward, drifts toward the table, and settles into an empty bowl. Both children smile. The woman does not. She removes the feather, wipes the bowl, and returns it to the pile with the calm expression of someone who's prevented the decline of civilization for the third time this evening. A widely accepted feature of working-class childhood in the 1840s is that children often contribute to household income or domestic survival from an early age. Their tasks vary according to place, family occupation, and age. They may scare birds from fields, gather fuel, mind younger siblings, fetch water, tend animals, wind yarn, carry messages, weed gardens, or assist with seasonal labour. Not every task is harsh, and not every hour is occupied. Still, usefulness arrives early. The older child has already shown enough skill at the spinning wheel to produce thread. She knows how to keep a younger sibling from the fire, where the dry kindling is stored, and which bowl belongs to whom. She probably knows paths through the surrounding fields that you could not follow even in daylight. The younger one may be trusted with simpler duties. He can gather dropped twigs, sort feathers badly, carry small objects, and provide unnecessary commentary. The boundary between work and play remains flexible. A child sent to collect sticks may turn the journey into a game. Someone minding geese may sing, chase shadows, or carve marks into a fence. Work does not erase imagination. It simply gives imagination a schedule. Formal education is becoming more available during this period, but attendance remains uneven. Sunday schools teach reading, religious knowledge, and sometimes writing. Charity schools, dame schools, church schools, and local arrangements offer instruction of varying quality, yet fees, distance, weather, family need, and seasonal work may interrupt learning. The older child can perhaps recognize letters. A Bible rests on the shelf above the hearth. It may be one of the few books in the cottage. The man reaches for it now, not to begin a sermon, but because the child has asked about a word from the story. He opens the book carefully. The pages are worn at the edges. He turns them near the fire, searching for a familiar passage. The child leans closer and traces one line with a finger. Reading ability is not always simple to measure. A person may read printed words but struggle to write. Someone may recognize prayers and familiar passages without reading unfamiliar text easily. Another may sign a name yet prefer not to read aloud. Investigators continue to differ over how quickly literacy spreads among rural labouring families during the early Victorian period. Surviving signatures suggest gradual improvement, but a signature alone cannot reveal how comfortably someone reads. What material is available, or how often literacy is used at home? The man points to a word. The child sounds it out slowly. She gets it wrong. He waits. She tries again. This time, the word emerges correctly, and her face brightens with quiet satisfaction. The younger child immediately repeats it. Though he has not looked at the page and may not know what it means, his contribution is praised anyway, which seems to restore his fading spirits. There is an unusual detail associated with some early lessons. Children may learn letters from horn books, small paddles carrying the alphabet and a short religious text beneath a transparent sheet of horn by the 1840s. Such objects are already old-fashioned in many places, but examples remain in memory and use. The design is durable, practical, and difficult to improve through chewing, which children have apparently attempted in every century. No horn book appears here. The Bible and spoken memory are enough for tonight. The woman begins preparing the children for sleep without announcing it. She wipes the younger child's face with a damp cloth. He objects as though he has been betrayed. His hands are inspected, his hair smoothed, and one stocking removed because the heel is wet. The older child returns the fibre to its basket and moves the stool closer to the wall. She knows the sequence. Work is put away. Loose objects are gathered. Anything that might be stepped on in darkness is moved from the floor. The children's clothing remains simple and layered. A shift or shirt may serve as a sleeping garment. Outer clothes are folded, hung, or placed where they can be worn again. The cottage does not maintain a large collection of nightwear for every season and mood. The younger child rubs his eyes. The woman asks whether he has said his prayers. He claims that he has. She waits. He begins again. The prayer is brief, familiar, and slightly blurred by exhaustion. The older child joins softly. The man closes the Bible and listens. Religious practice belongs to ordinary domestic routine, though its intensity differs widely between households. When the prayer ends, the younger child asks for water. He receives a small drink. Then he asks whether the black dog can enter the cottage. The man says no. The child asks how he knows. The man says the cat would object. This answer is accepted. Children's fears are rarely separate from the world around them. Fire, darkness, animals, storms, illness, and stories all mingle in the mind. Adults offer reassurance, though they are often the same adults who introduced the ghost half an hour earlier. The woman lifts the younger child onto her lap. His resistance is gone now. His body softens against her, one hand still curled near his chest. She rocks slightly, not in a cradle, but in the steady rhythm of her own breathing. The older child remains awake beside the hearth. She watches the embers and asks one final question about tomorrow's work. The woman answers quietly, "There will be water to fetch, ash to clear, perhaps snow to sweep from the doorway." The child nods as though agreeing to an appointment. In this room, learning does not stop when formal lessons end. It travels through stories, imitation, warnings, chores, songs, mistakes, and repeated practice. The children absorb the shape of the household simply by living within it. They know which sounds matter, which objects are dangerous, which scraps must be saved, which tales are told when the chimney moans. The younger child's breathing becomes slow and even. The older one finally lowers her head. Near the fire, work, play, fear, discipline, and affection settle together, making childhood not a separate world, but a smaller place within the same glowing circle. The younger child sleeps against the woman, while the older one watches the fire through heavy eyes. Around them, the room seems to shrink. Nothing has moved closer, yet darkness removes the corners, the table, stools, hanging clothes, baskets, tools, and bodies all gather within the same dim circle. Every breath belongs to everyone. Every rustle can be heard. Privacy, as you understand it, has very little room to stretch. The woman lifts the sleeping child and carries him toward the curtained corner. The cloth hanging there is thin and faded. It reaches from a cord near the ceiling almost to the floor, though a gap remains at the bottom. Behind it lies a narrow sleeping space, perhaps no more than a bedstead pressed against the wall with a chest beside it. The curtain does not block sound. It barely blocks light. Still, it creates a boundary, and boundaries do not need to be perfect to matter. The older child rises and follows, taking care not to catch her foot on the uneven floor. She carries one folded garment and places it behind the curtain. The woman whispers something. The child nods. You turn your gaze toward the hearth. This small act of looking away is part of the household's etiquette. Modesty depends less on solid walls than on cooperation. People pretend not to notice certain movements. They face another direction. They lower their voices. They wait before crossing the room. A cottage family may share little space, but that does not mean they lack ideas about privacy. They create it through timing, habit, cloth screens, furniture placement, and social rules. In many labouring homes during the early Victorian period, several family members sleep in the same room, especially when the cottage contains only one main chamber and a loft. Beds may be shared by siblings, parents, relatives, lodgers, or visitors. Sleeping arrangements change according to age, gender, household size, illness, and available space. A separate bedroom for every person would be an extraordinary luxury here. Even a bed belongs to more than sleep. Its curtains may shield a sick person. Its blankets may be borrowed during severe cold. The space beneath it stores boxes, shoes, tools, or food vessels. During the day, bedding can be folded back so the room feels less crowded. The man stands and places his stool near this table. He does not step behind the curtain. That area belongs to the woman and children for the moment. Instead, he examines the fire and occupies himself with the poker. Nothing is announced. Everyone simply knows where not to look. The idea of private domestic life is gaining importance in 19th century Britain, particularly among prosperous families whose separate parlours, dining rooms, bedrooms, kitchens, and servant spaces, yet in poorer rural housing. Architecture often refuses such distinctions. The single room must perform them all. A meal ends, and it becomes a workshop. Work stops, and it becomes a sleeping chamber. Someone falls ill, and it becomes a sick room. A baby is born, and it becomes a place of recovery, nursing, worry, and whispered advice. The room changes function because the walls cannot. You hear quiet movement behind the curtain. Fabric is loosened. A wooden bed frame gives a faint creak. The older child whispers a question, and the woman replies in a murmur too low to understand. The man glances toward you. Then he looks at your stool and points toward a place nearer the wall. You move it without asking. The central floor must be cleared before bedding can be spread. Your position in the room matters. The oldest person may receive the warmest chair. A guest may be offered a place near the fire, though not always the best sleeping space. Children occupy corners, lofts, shared beds, or pallets on the floor. Household authority appears in who sits where, who speaks first, and who controls the use of scarce objects. The chair near the table carries more dignity than the low stools. The bedstead behind the curtain has greater status than a straw pallet. The place nearest the fire offers comfort, but also smoke, sparks, and interruption. Every advantage comes with a small complaint attached. One curious custom found in accounts of crowded households involves using bed curtains not only for warmth and modesty, but also as a place to store small belongings. Pockets, hooks, or folds might hold a cap, cloth, prayer book, or household object. A sleeping enclosure becomes part shelter, part cupboard, and part private world. The curtain before you is too worn for grand storage, yet a small pouch hangs on the inner side. You glimpse it only when the cloth shifts. The woman emerges and pulls the curtain almost closed. The sleeping child is hidden now, though one small foot remains visible at the edge. She notices, tucks it inward, and smooths the cloth. The older child stays behind the screen. The woman returns to the hearth, where the man has set aside the poker. They speak quietly about the night's arrangements. You cannot hear every word, but your presence has complicated matters. A visitor must sleep somewhere. Hospitality asks the household to make room. Space asks the household to be realistic. The result will likely involve rearranging bodies, bedding, and expectations. Social historians have yet to agree on whether overcrowded cottages necessarily produced weaker personal boundaries than modern homes. Written reports from reformers often describe shared rooms as morally troubling, but such observers may impose middle-class standards on families who use different forms of restraint and courtesy. Crowding is real, so is dignity. The household does not discuss intimate matters openly simply because everyone shares a room. Instead, certain subjects are delayed, softened, or expressed through familiar signals. A cough may announce that someone is awake. A deliberate movement may warn others before a person rises in darkness. Silence can protect as effectively as a locked door. The woman folds a cloth and places it over the back of the chair. The man moves toward the door and checks that it is secure. His role gives him authority in certain matters, but the woman governs the arrangement of bedding, clothing, food, and many details of indoor life. Power here is not simple. Age matters, gender matters, income matters, skill matters. The person who knows where everything is stored possesses a quiet command that official titles rarely capture. You notice that the woman never asks where the blankets are. The man does. She gives him a look. He opens the wrong chest. The look deepens. He closes it and tries another. This small domestic exchange crosses centuries without difficulty. The older child whispers from behind the curtain. The woman answers that she must settle down. The whispering stops for perhaps 10 seconds, then resumes. The younger child remains asleep. A log cracks in the hearth. and everyone glances toward it. The noise feels louder now because the room has entered its nighttime mood. Voices lower, movements become more deliberate. The household begins protecting the sleep of those who have already surrendered. The man finds the blankets at last. They are folded in a wooden chest near the wall. Beneath a spare shirt and a bundle of cloth, he lifts them out one by one. They are thick, rough, and unevenly coloured from years of use and repair. The woman inspects each before deciding where it belongs. You look toward the ladder leading to the loft. That space may offer some separation, but it is not necessarily comfortable. Heat rises, smoke gathers, and the roof lies close overhead in summer. The loft may become stifling in winter. Drafts move beneath tiles or through thatch. Still, a loft creates distance from the main room and may be valued by older children, servants, or lodgers. Tonight, the storm makes every sleeping place less certain. The wind presses against the wall. The curtain breathes inward and outward. The firelight fades across the ceiling beams. You understand now that privacy in this cottage is not a room that can be entered and locked. It is a shared performance. One person turns away, another lowers a voice, a curtain is drawn, a stool is moved, a question waits until morning. The family grants one another small islands of solitude inside a space where no one can truly disappear. The woman takes the first blanket from the man and carries it toward the cleared floor. She shakes it once, gently, so dust does not rise too high. The night is ready to change the room again. The blanket opens across the cleared floor with a soft, heavy sigh. Dust lifts, turns briefly golden in the firelight, and settles again. Beneath it, the woman places a narrow mattress stuffed with straw. The shape is uneven, thicker at one end and flatter where years of sleeping bodies have pressed it down. You watch her kneel and pull the corners straight. The mattress is not soft in the modern sense. It rustles when touched, and the straw inside shifts into ridges. A person lying upon it must arrange the filling by hand, pushing sharp stems away from shoulders and hips. Comfort depends partly on patience and partly on being tired enough not to care. Tonight, everyone is tired enough. The man brings another sack from the chest. This one is smaller and intended for the head. It contains straw, wool scraps, feathers, or perhaps a mixture of whatever has remained available. He squeezes it once, decides that this counts as a pillow, and sets it near the wall. The woman immediately turns it the other way. Apparently, even improvised bedding has a correct direction. Across England in the 1840s, the quality of beds varies enormously. Prosperous households may own wooden bedsteads, feather mattresses, linen sheets, and heavy curtains. Poorer families often rely on straw-filled ticks, flock mattresses made from scraps of wool, simple pallets, folded blankets, or shared sleeping surfaces. Bedding can represent a large portion of a household's possessions and may appear prominently in wills and inventories. Here, every layer has value. A blanket is not merely decoration. It may decide whether someone sleeps or shivers until dawn. The woman unfolds a second blanket. Its original colour is difficult to determine. Brown, grey, faded blue, and several thoughtful repairs have reached an agreement. One corner carries a patch cut from a different cloth, thicker than the rest and slightly scratchy. You touch it. The wool is coarse but warm. It smells of smoke, storage, lanolin, and the faint dry scent of old straw. The fragrance is not unpleasant exactly. It is simply very committed to the century. The man retrieves a cloak from a peg and adds it to the pile. Outdoor clothing often becomes nighttime bedding when cold intensifies. Coats, shawls, petticoats, and cloaks can be spread over sleepers or wrapped around shoulders, No one worries that this violates a carefully labelled category. Warm cloth is warm cloth. Your own coat still hangs near the fire, now mostly dry. You glance toward it. The woman follows your gaze and nods, making clear that it may soon serve as your personal roof. The children behind the curtain have grown quiet. You can hear the older one shifting on the bedstead. Then the frame gives a small wooden complaint. The younger child murmurs in sleep. The woman pauses to listen. No one cries. She continues. The pallet on the floor is placed close enough to benefit from the hearth, but not so close that sparks are likely to reach it. This distance is judged carefully. Move nearer and the warmth improves. Move too near and a blanket may scorch, a sleeve may catch, or smoke may disturb breathing. You are learning that every desirable place in the cottage is also mildly dangerous. The man takes a small brush and sweeps the floor around the mattress. Grit, straw fragments, and ash gather into a thin line. He pushes them away from the bedding, then checks the stones near the hearth for glowing sparks. One ember lies beyond the usual fire area. He crushes it beneath the iron shovel. The room smells briefly sharper, like burned dust. An intriguing domestic habit appears in several parts of Britain. Fresh straw used for bedding is sometimes mixed with dried herbs such as lavender, sweet woodruff, mint, or rosemary when they are available. The plants add scent and may help discourage insects, though the effect is limited. A pleasant-smelling mattress remains attractive to fleas if the fleas are sufficiently determined. No herbs seem to have been added here. The mattress offers pure straw with no attempt at perfume. The woman presses one hand into its centre. The filling shifts away. She unfastens a small opening in the fabric and reaches inside, pulling the straw into a more even layer. Dry stems whisper against the ticking. Bedding needs regular attention. Straw becomes crushed, damp, dusty, and inhabited. It must be shaken, turned, aired, or replaced when possible. Fresh filling may arrive after harvest, making autumn an important season for renewing mattresses. Old straw can be burned, spread, or given another use. Assuming it has not become too unpleasant to discuss near supper, the cottage does not possess enough separate bedding for every person to sleep alone. That is normal. Shared beds conserve warmth and space. Children sleep together. Married couples share. Visitors may be placed with relatives, on floor pallets, near the hearth, or wherever the household can create a reasonable surface. Tonight, the woman considers the arrangements like a commander studying a very soft battlefield. The younger children remain behind the curtain. The man will likely sleep nearby. You receive the floor pallet because you are a guest, though this honour may also reflect the fact that no one wants to climb over you in the loft. The older child may share the bedstead with the younger one and their mother for part of the night. The exact arrangement can change as people wake, become cold, or need to tend the fire. Researchers continue to debate how often whole families shared a single bed compared with using several improvised surfaces in one room. Official inspections sometimes describe extreme crowding. Yet those reports often focus on the poorest or most troubled housing. Household inventories list beds but may not reveal who slept where, or whether a folded sack became a bed only after darkness. The written record prefers furniture. Human bodies are more difficult to catalogue. The woman lays a cloth over the straw mattress. It is not a fitted sheet. It does not snap neatly into place. She tucks the edges beneath the pallet and smooths the centre with both palms. A second cloth is rolled near the foot. You realise it will serve as extra covering if the night grows colder. The man lowers the fire slightly by shifting one burning piece away from the front. The bright flames shrink. Red light remains beneath them, steady and deep. As the room darkens, the bedding becomes more inviting. Your body notices the mattress before your mind approves of it. Shoulders ache from walking, legs feel heavy, toes have only recently forgiven the lane. Even rough straw begins to resemble luxury when you have been upright for long enough. You remove your gloves once more and place them inside the coat. Warm items are sometimes kept together so they do not become damp again before morning. Your boots remain near the door, close enough to dry but far enough from the fire to avoid hardening the leather. The woman brings a small wooden warming object toward the hearth, perhaps a pan meant to hold heated embers. Bed-warming pans are known in wealthier homes, but simpler households may use heated stones, bricks, bottles, or cloth wrapped around something warm. Here, she chooses a smooth stone that has rested near the fire. She tests it with her palm, wraps it in old fabric, and places it briefly beneath the blanket. The effect will not last all night. For the first few minutes, however, your feet may believe they have entered paradise. The man smiles at your expression. He has seen guests become devoted to warm stones before. The older child calls softly from behind the curtain. The woman answers, then adjusts the screen to block more of the draft. A wooden chest is moved slightly against one edge so the cloth will not billow inward. Everything is nearly ready. The mattress lies close to the hearth. Your coat waits to become a covering. The wrapped stone releases a small pocket of heat beneath the blanket. The fire lowers into a red breathing bed of coals. You sit on the edge of the pallet. Straw crackles beneath your weight, loud enough to wake every mouse within the county. The mattress shifts. One hard stem presses into your side. You move, and another appears elsewhere. This is going well. You lie back carefully. The pillow is firm, uneven, and shaped like a disappointed loaf. Still, it supports your head. The blanket settles across your chest. Your coat adds another layer, carrying the smell of winter road and hearth smoke together. Around you, the cottage prepares to surrender its daytime shape. The table stands silent. The spinning wheel has stopped. Tools rest by the wall. Bedding now claims the floor where work took place only moments ago. The room has become a sleeping place without changing its walls, and you settle into the rustling straw as the family arranges itself around the fading warmth. You settle deeper into the straw, and almost at once the fire reminds you that warmth is never entirely gentle. A spark leaps from the hearth, it lands on the stone, glows for a breath, and disappears beneath the man's shoe. He does not startle. He simply presses down, waits, and lifts his foot once the ember has died. The gesture is so ordinary that it troubles you more than panic would. Your blanket lies only a short distance away. The woman notices your glance and pulls one corner farther from the fire. She has judged this distance many times before. The family knows where sparks usually fall, where heat becomes too strong, and which gusts are likely to send smoke into the room. You are still learning. The fire has warmed your clothes, cooked your supper, lit the work, comforted the children, and softened the storm. It has also filled the beams with soot, dried every wooden surface, and placed a bed of burning material beside sleeping bodies. The arrangement is useful. It is not safe. Open hearths remain a major source of household danger in 19th century Britain. Sparks can ignite clothing, bedding, rushes, wooden furniture, or thatch. Loose sleeves and long skirts are especially vulnerable when someone bends over the flames. Children, older people, and anyone sleeping close to the hearth face obvious risks. There is no fire alarm, no extinguisher hangs beside the door. Water may be kept nearby, but it must be carried in buckets, and a roof fire can spread faster than help arrives. The man uses the poker to draw the burning wood inward. Bright flames shrink behind the iron support. He adds no fresh fuel for the rest of the night. The household wants steady embers rather than lively sparks. The room dims. Red light gathers low in the hearth. It shines through cracks in the wood and along the edges of grey ash. Every few moments, a small flame rises, searches the surface, then disappears. The woman checks the floor once more. She lifts a fragment of straw that has escaped from your mattress and carries it away from the fire. Another piece lies near the stone edge. She removes that too. Dry straw burns eagerly. A mattress stuffed with it is comfortable enough by cottage standards, but beside an open hearth it becomes a bundle of excellent kindling shaped like a guest. You decide not to think about this. Naturally, you think about nothing else. Smoke forms the quieter danger. It does not leap, it lingers. Even when the chimney draws well, some smoke escapes into the room. It stains walls, darkens beams, irritates eyes, settles in lungs, and clings to fabric. Damp fuel makes the problem worse. A blocked or poorly built flue can fill the cottage quickly. You notice a faint haze beneath the ceiling. Firelight gives it a copper colour. It drifts around the beams, curls toward the chimney, and vanishes slowly from your place on the floor. The air is clearer than it is above, though not clean. The woman coughs once. The man does not look up. A practical reality of cottage construction is that ventilation often depends on gaps rather than planned systems. Air enters beneath doors, around windows, through roof spaces, and along imperfect joints. These drafts make the room cold, but they also provide oxygen for the fire and help smoke move toward the chimney. Seal the cottage too well, and the fire struggles. Leave it too open, and winter enters freely. Comfort rests in an awkward middle ground. The cloth beneath the door shifts when the wind rises. A line of cold air crosses the floor and reaches your cheek. You pull the blanket higher, grateful for warmth and irritated by the draft that helps keep you breathing. Domestic historians remain uncertain about how fully ordinary families understood the invisible dangers of poor combustion. They clearly recognize choking smoke, headaches, bad drafts, and the warning signs of a troubled chimney. Whether they understood gases in modern scientific terms is another matter. Experience taught them that some fires made a room dangerous long before chemistry gave the danger a precise name. The man looks toward the hearth opening. The smoke is rising properly now. He places the poker beside him but does not lie down yet. Someone will remain awake until the fire becomes calmer. This is not a formal watch, merely habit. The last person awake checks the embers. Door, children, animals, and anything left too close to heat. The chimney gives a sudden hollow cough. Soot falls. A black sprinkle lands behind the pothook, followed by one larger piece that breaks apart on the stone. Everyone listens. Nothing else moves. Soot deposits can ignite inside a flue, producing a chimney fire that roars upward with frightening speed. Flames may emerge from the top, sparks may fall onto a thatched roof, and heat can crack masonry or ignite nearby timber. Chimneys, therefore, require sweeping. Professional chimney sweeps work in towns and villages, though access, cost, and frequency vary. In many places, small boys are sent into narrow flues, a practice increasingly criticised during the 19th century, but not fully ended by early reform efforts. A strange method of informal chimney cleaning involves lowering or pulling bundles of holly through a flue. The stiff leaves scrape soot from the sides. In other households, a goose may be dropped or drawn through the chimney, its flapping wings loosening deposits. This sounds inventive. It also sounds like a poor evening for the goose. No bird is produced tonight, which comes as a relief to you and probably to the local poultry. The man reaches into the hearth with the poker and shifts the fallen soot away from the embers. He studies the chimney opening, then sits back. The roof remains quiet except for the storm. Fire is not the only threat created by heat. Clothing left too near the hearth can scorch slowly without obvious flame. Leather can dry and split. A warming stone can burn skin if wrapped poorly. Pots may overturn. Iron tools remain hot after their colour looks harmless. The woman reaches beneath your blanket and removes the wrapped stone. It is cooled enough to touch comfortably, but she does not leave it pressed against your feet all night. A sleeping person may not notice heat damaging the skin, especially when exhausted or chilled. Your toes protest the loss. Your common sense approves. The younger child murmurs behind the curtain. The woman pauses, listens, then relaxes when the sound fades. Children near open fires require constant attention. A single stumble can become disaster. Clothing may be protected with aprons or careful positioning, but there is no complete safeguard. Rules are repeated until they become instinct. Do not run near the hearth. Do not reach across the flame. Do not touch the iron. Do not sleep with loose cloth trailing toward the embers. These warnings belong to childhood as firmly as prayers and chores. The man finally lies down near the wall, though he keeps his head raised on one arm. His eyes remain on the fire, ashes drawn over the brightest coals. The glow dulls. Heat still reaches you, softer now, no longer sharp against your face. The room cools at once. You feel it first around your shoulders, then along the side, facing away from the hearth. Safety means surrendering some warmth. The household accepts this trade because it must. Outside, the storm lashes the roof. Inside, flame becomes ember. Ember becomes red shadow, and red shadow hides beneath ash. You listen to the chimney. Air moves through it with a low, steady breath. No roar, no shower of sparks, no sudden smoke rolling into the room. Only the quiet working of a dangerous comfort kept under watch by people who know that survival depends not merely on making fire, but on knowing when to let it fade. The man's breathing gradually deepens, though the cottage itself does not sleep. You lie beneath the coarse blanket and listen as the room rearranges its sounds around darkness. The fire has become a muted red presence beneath ash. It no longer crackles brightly. Instead, it gives occasional soft ticks as wood settles and iron cools. Behind the curtain, one child turns over. The bed frame answers with a creak. The other child whispers something from a dream, a few blurred words that belong to no waking conversation. The woman murmurs reassurance without fully waking. Her voice rises, floats briefly in the dark, and disappears. You close your eyes. A scratching begins near the wall. It is faint at first, almost delicate. Then it pauses, moves a little farther along, and resumes with patient determination. You open your eyes again. The cat has heard it too. A shape unfolds beneath the table. Two pale reflections catch the last hearth glow. The cat remains still, head tilted, ears forward. Whatever moves inside the wall has immediately become the most important matter in the room. Rats and mice are common companions of rural households. Grain, bread, animal feed, warmth, straw, and gaps in building materials offer them food and shelter. A cottage may be swept carefully and provisions stored in boxes or suspended containers. Yet small creatures still discover opportunities. They need very little encouragement. A crumb beneath a chest can become supper. A sack of grain can become a palace. A straw mattress can become a neighbourhood. The scratching stops. The cat waits. Nothing moves. Then a mouse darts from the shadow near the wall. You see only a brief flicker across the floor. The cat follows at once, silent and quick. A stool shifts. Something bumps beneath the table. The younger child wakes and asks what is happening. The man answers from the darkness. Cat business. This appears to be enough explanation. The child settles again. Cats in cottages earn their place by controlling vermin, though they also provide warmth, companionship, and a superior attitude toward human arrangements. They are not decorative pets in the modern sense. Their work protects food stores and reduces damage to cloth, rope, and wooden containers. The cat reappears. Its success is unclear. It sits near the hearth and begins washing one paw with exaggerated calm, which may indicate victory, failure, or a refusal to discuss professional matters. From outside comes a dull thump. The man raises his head. Another sound follows, lower and more prolonged. It seems to come from a small outbuilding close to the cottage. Perhaps a cow shifts its weight against a stall. Perhaps a tethered animal kicks at bedding. Perhaps something has entered where it should not. The man listens. No urgent noise follows. He lowers his head again. Livestock shape the night even when kept outside the main living room. Cows, pigs, goats, poultry, and horses represent food, income, transport, manure, labour, or future security. Their condition matters deeply. A sick animal can threaten an entire household's plans. Some cottages share a wall with a byre or small animal shelter. This arrangement allows easier care and may contribute warmth, though it also contributes smells, insects, noise, and a close acquaintance with livestock digestion. You become aware of a heavy animal scent passing through a crack near the door. There is your evidence. A hen clucks somewhere beyond the wall. Another answers. The sound is brief and irritated, as though poultry have been disturbed by a dream of administrative failure. Then silence returns. A recognised feature of 19th century rural households is that daily time often follows animals and natural light rather than precise clocks. Cows need milking, horses need feeding, and poultry begins stirring according to dawn. A family may own a clock, hear a church bell, or judge hours by the fire, stars, weather, and routine at night. Time becomes especially uncertain. You cannot glance at a glowing screen. You do not know whether 10 minutes or an hour has passed. The storm makes every interval feel longer. Wind crosses the roof in broad waves. The thatch or tiles respond with tiny movements. Timber contracts as the temperature falls. One beam gives a sudden sharp crack. Your body stiffens. No one else reacts. Old buildings speak constantly. Wood dries, settles, twists, and carries sound from one part of the structure to another. A noise above your head may originate near the door. A scrape inside the wall may be a branch outside. The cottage turns simple physics into a collection of mysteries. Another creak comes from the ladder. You look toward it. Nothing is there. The loft remains dark. You remind yourself of the stories about black dogs, wandering lights, and concealed shoes. This is unhelpful. A bat may sometimes enter through gaps near the roof or chimney, especially in older buildings. During winter, many bats are less active, but an unusually warm space can attract movement. Their sudden fluttering has inspired fear and superstition for centuries, though the creature itself is simply searching for shelter and insects. At this moment, no bat appears. You appreciate its restraint. The woman rises quietly behind the curtain. You hear cloth move, then careful footsteps cross the floor. She checks the children first. After that, she approaches the hearth and kneels. One hand hovers above the ash to judge remaining warmth. A faint ember glows when she stirs the surface with the poker. She does not add fuel. Instead, she draws the ash back over it, preserving what heat remains. Her movements are nearly soundless. She's done this half awake many times. Some observers disagree about how regularly one household member remains alert through the night in poor rural homes. There is rarely a formal watch unless illness, birth, severe weather, or danger requires it. Yet broken sleep is common. Babies cry, animals stir, fires need checking, wind loosens shutters, older people wake from pain, rest comes in fragments. The woman turns toward the door. She hears something outside. You hear it a moment later, a soft scrape, then another. The man sits upright. The cat stops washing. All three adults listen. A shadow passes beneath the door where cold air enters around the cloth roll. The scrape repeats. The man reaches for the poker, not because he expects a ghost, but because iron is close and practical. He approaches the door and places one hand on the latch. A low whine comes from outside. The tension leaves the room. It is a dog. He opens the door only a narrow distance. Wind pushes snow through the gap. A shaggy shape slips inside, shaking itself immediately and distributing icy water with democratic fairness. You pull the blanket over your face. The woman closes the door and mutters at the animal. The dog circles twice near the threshold, then settles on the floor with a groan. It may belong to this household or a neighbour. In villages and farm communities, dogs move between yards, fields, barns, and hearths with more freedom than many modern pets. They guard, herd, hunt, warn, and consume whatever falls within reach. This one smells of wet fur, mud, and winter. The cat stares from beside the hearth. The dog avoids eye contact. A small peace treaty forms without words. The dog's arrival changes the room's rhythm. Its breathing is louder than the children's. Its paws twitch as it warms, every so often. Its collar or tag gives a faint metal sound. The man returns to his bedding. The woman tucks the cloth beneath the door again and slips behind the curtain. You remain awake. Now the cottage holds more sleepers than before, yet rest seems farther away. A mouse scratches. The cat listens. The dog dreams. A child sighs. Timbers shift above you. The fire hides beneath ash, neither alive nor dead. Night in the cottage is not silence. It is a layered gathering of bodies, instincts, duties, and small interruptions. Sleep comes not because the world becomes still, but because the household learns which noises require action and which can be allowed to pass. Your eyes close once more, this time. When the roof creaks, you do not move. When the dog sighs, you accept it. When tiny feet travel inside the wall, you trust the cat to continue negotiations. The cottage keeps watch through all its inhabitants, each waking briefly in turn, each listening, each settling again as the storm moves slowly across the darkened fields. Sleep begins at the edges of your thoughts. It does not arrive cleanly. The mattress rustles whenever you shift, and the blanket presses against your chin with the roughness of old wool. One shoulder feels warm from the hearth, the other lies close to the floor, where a cold current moves beneath the door and along the stones. You turn slightly. Straw whispers beneath you. The dog releases a deep sigh near the threshold, as though exhausted by responsibilities no one has asked it to perform. The cat remains somewhere near the wall, listening for the mouse that has refused to respect bedtime. Behind the curtain, the family breathes in several uneven rhythms. The cottage is full of sleep, but not yet full of stillness. Your eyes close. At once. The room changes. Sounds become larger when you cannot see their sources. The chimney draws a long breath. Rain touches the shutter. A piece of cooling iron clicks beside the hearth. The dog moves one paw across the floor. Each noise reaches you, pauses, and drifts away. You begin to lose track of what is outside and what belongs to memory. The scrape of branches becomes the sound of your boots passing through frozen hedges. The faint warmth near your face becomes the distant glow you first saw through the storm. The smell of smoke carries you back to the doorway, where you stood with snow on your shoulders and one hand above the iron latch. Now the road seems very far away. The cottage has absorbed you. Your coat lies across the blanket. Its weight is comforting. It smells of wet earth, wood smoke, and the long winter lane. Every breath brings those scents together until the journey and the shelter seem part of the same dream. Someone whispers behind the curtain. You cannot tell whether it is the woman or the older child. The words too soft. Perhaps one of them is asking whether the storm has eased. Perhaps a dream has opened an old memory. The reply comes after a pause. A few quiet words. Then silence. Night talk often belongs to families in fragments. Concerns postponed during work return when the room is dark. A poor harvest. An unpaid bill. A neighbour's illness. A child's future. Or news from a distant relation may be discussed when younger ears are assumed to be asleep. You remain still, whether they believe you're sleeping or simply do not mind your presence. The voices continue briefly. The man speaks now. His tone is low and tired. You hear a place name, perhaps a nearby village, then something about work. The woman answers. A child turns over, and the conversation stops. In labouring households, winter can bring reduced employment for some occupations. Those seasonal patterns differ greatly. Agricultural tasks continue, but opportunities and wages may change with weather and local demand. Families often combine several forms of work: credit, garden produce, animal keeping, informal exchange, and assistance from relatives or neighbours. Survival rarely depends on one income alone. It depends on a web. A repaired tool saves money. A shared meal reduces waste. A neighbour lends fuel. A child gathers sticks. A garden stores part of summer inside winter roots. The household around you rests within that web, even when no one names it. Your breathing slows. The fire beneath the ash seems to pulse with it. A faint glow appears, then dims as the surface shifts. You imagine the ember as a tiny heart hidden inside the hearth. The thought is sentimental. You permit it because you're half asleep. The storm continues outside, though its violence has softened in your mind. Wind no longer sounds like danger. It becomes a broad, steady motion beyond the walls. A dark river passing over the roof. You drift farther. The room fills with images that do not quite belong together. You see the woman turning a spoon through the iron pot. Then the spoon becomes the hand of a clock. The clock has no face. Its ticking becomes the spinning wheel. Turning slowly beside the fire. The older child sits there again, drawing fibre into thread. The thread stretches across the room. It passes through the curtain, loops around the table, and follows the lane outside. Snow gathers on it without breaking it. You know this is a dream, though not enough to wake. Dreams in the 19th century are interpreted in many ways. Religious belief may frame them as warnings, temptations, or meaningful visions. Folk traditions connect particular images with luck, illness, marriage, travel, or death. Medical thinkers increasingly seek bodily and psychological explanations, though their theories remain varied. One curious tradition advises that a troubling dream should be told to the fire or running water before breakfast so its power may be carried away. Other customs warn against sharing certain dreams too soon, especially before food has been eaten or before the sun is fully risen. The rules disagree. Dreams, like weather, resist management. Antiquarians and social historians continue to discuss how seriously ordinary people treated dream interpretation in daily life. Printed dream books circulated widely, but ownership does not prove belief. A person may consult one for amusement, curiosity, reassurance, or because the dream was disturbing enough to make any answer feel useful. Your own dream offers no useful answer. The thread from the spinning wheel now leads to the black dog from the fireside story. It stands in the snow, silent and enormous, waiting near an ash tree. You remember being told that the cat would object if it entered the cottage. The thought is so absurd that the dream loosens. You wake slightly. The real dog is snoring near the door. The sound is low, irregular. and surprisingly human for a moment. You think the man is snoring too, creating an accidental duet. Then one stops while the other continues. You cannot tell which is which. The air has cooled further. Your nose feels cold. You pull the blanket higher and tuck your hands beneath your arms. A dim red line remains in the hearth. It paints the lower stones and leaves the rest of the room almost black. You can just make out the table, the ladder, and the hanging clothes. They have lost their daytime purpose in darkness. A shirt becomes a pale figure. A broom becomes a person waiting near the wall. A coat on a peg develops shoulders. You blink until the objects return to themselves. The woman coughs behind the curtain. The older child murmurs. Then a soft tune begins. It may be the same melody the woman hummed while sewing. Now it is slower, nearly without words. Perhaps she is comforting a restless child. Perhaps she is soothing herself. The song barely rises above the wind. You listen until it becomes impossible to separate from your own breathing. Oral songs carry memory through households that own few books. Ballads, hymns, work songs, nursery rhymes, local verses, and fragments learned from parents may survive for generations. Words shift, tunes change. A song can travel across counties while losing every trace of its first singer. The melody in this room may be old. It may also have been invented this evening. No one will record it. That does not make it less real. The tune fades, leaving the room softer than before. You think of the hands you have watched tonight. Hands lifting the latch, hands stirring stew, hands turning wet cloth, hands guiding wool, sharpening wood, testing embers, arranging blankets, and pulling a sleeping child closer. The cottage endures through those movements. Not one is grand enough for a history painting. Together, they hold back hunger, cold, darkness, and fear. You drift again. This time, memory carries you somewhere warmer. The storm becomes distant rain. The straw beneath you becomes dry summer grass. The hearth glow turns into evening sunlight across a field. You hear bees. Then the sound changes. It is sleet against the shutter. You hover between seasons, between waking and sleep, between the cottage as it is and the cottage as your tired mind rebuilds it. The voices behind the curtain have stopped. The dog has stopped snoring. Even the mouse seems to have accepted defeat for a rare moment. The entire room becomes quiet. You lie inside that quiet and feel the weight of the blanket, the fading heat near your cheek, and the rough pillow beneath your head. The storm no longer asks anything of you. The road is gone beneath snow. The latch is closed. The family rests. You allow your thoughts to loosen completely, and the cottage gathers around you until walls, fire, breath, and darkness blend into one slow winter dream. You wake before the room has decided to become morning. At first, there is only cold. It presses against your face, settles along your shoulders, and slips beneath the blanket wherever the cloth has loosened. The fire no longer warms you from across the room. Its presence has narrowed to a faint red stain beneath the ash. You do not move. For several breaths, you remain inside the last edge of sleep, unsure whether the storm is still raging or whether the sound near the roof belongs to a dream. Then sleet touches the shutter. A branch drags across the wall. The dog sighs near the door. The cottage returns around you. Your body feels stiff from the floor. One hip has found the least generous part of the straw mattress. The pillow has changed shape during the night and now seems determined to push your head toward the wall. You shift carefully. Straw crackles with astonishing volume. The dog lifts its head. Behind the curtain, someone turns over. You freeze. No one wakes fully, and the room settles again. The darkness is changing, though only slightly. A pale grey line appears around one edge of the shutter. It is not sunlight yet. It is merely the suggestion that darkness may eventually end. The air smells different from the evening. The stew is gone. The wet wool has dried. Smoke remains, mixed with cold ash, sleeping bodies, old straw, damp leather, and the animal warmth near the threshold. The cottage has spent the night breathing quietly into itself. Your nose feels numb. You pull the blanket closer and look toward the hearth. The ash has formed a soft, uneven mound. Beneath it, one ember survives. You see its glow only when a thin crack opens across the surface. It brightens, then fades. The household depends on that small hidden heat. If it survives until waking, the morning fire can be coaxed back with less effort. If it dies completely, someone must begin with tinder, spark, patience, and possibly language unsuitable for sleepy children. A normal feature of rural household routine in the early Victorian period is the very early start to the working day. The exact hour depends on season, occupation, weather, and local custom, but tasks often begin near first light. Animals need feeding. Water must be fetched, fires revived, food prepared, and tools made ready before outdoor labour begins. Rest ends because necessity wakes first. The woman stirs behind the curtain. You hear cloth move, then the quiet creak of the bed frame. A pause follows. Perhaps she's sitting upright, gathering enough determination to leave the blankets. This is the coldest decision of the day. The room waits. At last, bare feet touch the floor. A sharp breath follows. The woman emerges, wrapped in a shawl. Her cap sits slightly crooked, in the dimness. She moves without hesitation, avoiding the stool, table leg, pallet, dog, and loose basket. You suspect she could cross the room with her eyes closed. She kneels beside the hearth. The dog watches but does not rise. Its expression suggests that morning routines are a human problem. The woman takes the poker and gently opens the ash. A thin orange glow appears. She leans closer. One careful breath reaches the ember. It brightens. Another breath. A tiny red vein spreads through the dark fuel. She adds a pinch of dry material, perhaps charred cloth, fine bark, or shaving saved for exactly this purpose. Smoke rises first. It curls toward her face. She turns aside, waits, and breathes again. A small flame appears. It trembles so delicately that the slightest careless movement could end it. You watch from beneath the blanket. The entire morning rests on something no larger than a leaf. The older child wakes next. She slips from behind the curtain and wraps a garment around her shoulders. Her hair has loosened during the night. She stands beside the woman, observing the fire without speaking. The younger child remains asleep. The man does too, though one change in his breathing suggests he is awake and pretending otherwise. This custom has survived remarkably well. The woman adds 2 thin sticks. The flame catches one edge, pauses, then begins to climb. Smoke thickens before the draft strengthens. A dark ribbon rolls into the room, making your eyes sting. The woman opens the door a fraction. Cold air rushes across the floor. You tighten beneath the blanket. The draft feeds the fire. Smoke rises more cleanly toward the chimney. The flame steadies. Then the door closes. The room remains cold, but the possibility of warmth has returned. A less familiar domestic detail concerns the use of yesterday's charred cloth as tinder. Small scraps of linen or cotton can be heated in a low oxygen container until they become highly flammable char cloth, when kept dry. The material catches a spark more readily than ordinary fabric. A household may preserve such tinder carefully because one spoiled box can turn a simple morning task into a long contest with flint and steel. No one wastes good tinder, No one wastes the first flame. The woman rests a small kettle near the growing fire. There's not yet enough heat to boil water, but she places it early. Time is saved by letting several tasks begin together. The older child moves toward the door. She checks the cloth along the threshold, lifts it, and finds the bottom edge damp. It will need drying again, for now. She folds it aside and reaches for the broom. The first sweeping begins softly. Ash, straw, dried mud, and fragments of yesterday gather into a narrow line. She works around sleeping bodies with practiced care. The broom passes close to your pallet. You lift one corner of the blanket. She sweeps beneath it. No greeting is needed. You have become temporary furniture. The man finally sits up. He rubs his face, coughs once, and looks toward the fire. The woman does not look back, but her posture suggests that she has noticed how conveniently he woke after the flame became stable. The oldest domestic strategy in history may be sleeping through the difficult part. He rises, pulls on his stockings, and reaches for his boots. The leather is cold but dry. He presses one thumb against the repaired heel of the stocking from last night. The darning has held. A small piece of evening labour has already entered the morning. Questions remain among social historians about how evenly early household duties were divided between men, women, and children in rural cottages. Broad patterns are clear, but daily practice varies with occupation, illness, age, pregnancy, widowhood, household structure, and individual skill. Records often describe expected roles more confidently than lived arrangements. Here, the woman revives the fire, the child sweeps, the man checks the door and weather. Each task connects to the next. He lifts the latch. The door opens. Grey winter light enters with a sweep of wind and loose snow. The dog stands at once and slips outside. Cold air fills the room so quickly that everyone near the hearth leans closer to the flame. Beyond the threshold, the lane has disappeared. Snow lies against the hedge, smooth except where wind has carved shallow ridges. The sky is pale and heavy. The storm has weakened, but fine flakes still move across the yard. The man studies the roofline, outbuildings, and path. Nothing appears broken. This alone counts as good news. He steps outside in his shirt sleeves for only a moment, brushes snow away from the doorway, then returns with his shoulders dusted white. The door closes. The cottage becomes dim again. Behind the curtain, the younger child wakes and asks whether it is morning. No one answers immediately. The question seems philosophical. The fire begins to crackle with more confidence. A faint band of warmth reaches the floor. The kettle gives one small metal sound as it heats. You push yourself upright, every joint objects. The straw mattress exhales beneath you. Your coat slips from the blanket and falls into your lap. It smells strongly of smoke now, as though the cottage has signed its name across the fabric. You rub your hands together. The older child carries the sweepings toward a container. Some ash will be kept, other debris will be removed. The floor beneath your pallet has already returned to its daytime role. Your bed is disappearing while you're still sitting on it. The woman glances toward you and gives a quiet nod. Morning has found you. Not brightly, not warmly, but steadily. The ember survived. The roof held. The family wakes. Grey light gathers around the shutter, and the first movements of work begin to fill the ashen room. The woman lifts the kettle as soon as the first tremor of steam appears around its lid. The water is not boiling yet, but it is warm enough to begin the morning. A little is poured into a bowl. The rest remains near the fire, where growing flames lick around the blackened metal. Your pallet is folded beneath you. The woman removes the blanket first, shakes it carefully, then lays it across the chair to air. The straw mattress follows. It bends awkwardly in the middle as the man lifts one end and the older child takes the other. Together, they carry it toward the wall. A moment ago, this was your bed. Now it becomes a bundled object waiting for night. The transformation is so quick that you almost doubt you slept there at all. The floor reappears, scattered with a few straw stems and the shallow marks left by weight. The older child sweeps those away. The main room belongs to work again. The younger child emerges from behind the curtain with hair standing in several directions. He looks at the revived fire, then at the table, clearly hoping breakfast has prepared itself during the night. It has not. The woman gives him a cloth and points toward his face. He wipes one cheek. She points again. He wipes the same cheek with greater commitment. The older child takes the cloth and completes the task while he stares into the hearth with injured dignity. The man opens the door once more and brings in a small armful of fuel. Snow dusts the wood. He knocks the pieces together near the threshold, sending loose white powder onto the floor that has just been swept. The older child looks at him. The woman looks at him. He pauses, considers the evidence, and uses his boot to push the snow back outside. Domestic authority has spoken without a word. The new fuel is placed beside the hearth, not directly upon it. The morning fire must grow gradually. Fine sticks have caught, and one split piece now burns along its lower edge. The room fills with a brighter scent of fresh wood. As flames rise, the cottage reveals itself again. The pale walls carry smoke stains above the hearth. Bowls wait on the shelf. The spinning wheel stands silent after its evening labour. Your gloves hang from the rail, finally dry. The repaired stocking is already being worn. Nothing is grand. Everything is ready. One dependable feature of rural domestic life in the 1840s is that the hearth structures the beginning of the day just as it governs the evening. Before hot food, warm washing water, or many household tasks can begin, the fire must be restored. Its successful revival marks the return of order after darkness. The woman adds yesterday's remaining broth to the pot. It has thickened overnight. A little water loosens it. Barley and vegetables settle at the bottom, carrying the memory of supper into breakfast. The younger child watches closely. He asks whether there is bread. The man cuts the final portion of the loaf. There is bread, though not enough for careless enthusiasm. Slices are handed out according to size and need. Yours is modest, but the warm broth will soften it. You hold the bowl between your palms and feel heat returning to your fingers. The first taste is smokier than last night. Perhaps the pot has absorbed the hearth. Perhaps you have outside. The dog barks once. The sound carries across the white yard. A moment later, another dog answers from somewhere beyond the hedge. The exchange feels like news travelling between cottages. The storm has passed far enough for morning duties to begin, but its work remains visible. Snow covers paths, weighs on branches, and fills the ruts in the lane. Anyone travelling today will move slowly. The man will need to check animals, clear access to the outbuilding, and inspect the roof more carefully. The woman has water, food, clothing, children, and the endless recovery from yesterday's weather to manage. The children will help. So will the fire. A curious morning custom in some communities involves reading the first behaviour of the hearth as a sign for the day. A flame that rises quickly may promise good fortune. Smoke returning into the room may suggest disagreement, visitors, or unsettled weather. Sparks flying toward a person can be interpreted as news or money approaching. The cottage fire sends one bright spark onto the stone. It lands near your foot. You move aside. Perhaps fortune is coming. Perhaps the fire is simply reminding you not to become sentimental. Those who study domestic culture still question whether such signs were sincerely trusted, playfully repeated, or used differently by each member of a household. Belief rarely leaves a clear record. A person might laugh at an omen, remember it all day, and mention it immediately if events seem to prove it correct. The woman does not interpret the spark, she crushes it with the shovel. Your breakfast ends. The bowl is wiped clean with the last edge of bread. The warmth settles into your stomach and spreads outward. Your body remains stiff, but the cold no longer feels personal. The man hands you your coat. It is dry now, rough and faintly warm. You pull it over your shoulders. Smoke rises from the fabric with the movement, carrying the smell of the cottage around you. Your gloves follow. This time, they're dry inside. A small victory. The older child opens the shutter. Grey daylight enters across the room. It is weak. But after the long night, it seems almost startling. The fire loses some of its visual power, though not its importance. Flames still burn. The kettle still warms. The household still turns toward the hearth even when light comes from the window. You stand near the door. The latch is cold beneath your hand. Behind you, morning continues without ceremony. The woman stirs the pot, the man gathers a tool, the older child folds the aired blanket, the younger one crouches near the dog, trying to fasten an imaginary collar made from string. The room has no need to preserve your visit. It simply carries on. You lift the latch. Cold air enters, clean and sharp. The snow outside reflects the pale sky, making the lane brighter than it was when you arrived. Your old footprints have vanished completely. For a moment, you remain at the threshold. You remember the distant amber window, the wet coat, the iron pot, the stories of wandering lights, the hidden ember beneath ash. All night, the cottage has survived through modest actions repeated with care. No heroic rescue has taken place. No grand invention has defeated winter. The household has endured because someone collected sticks, saved scraps, repaired cloth, watched children, checked sparks, and rose before dawn to breathe life into a fading coal. You step outside. The door closes softly behind you. The wind has weakened to a low movement through the hedge. Snow brushes against your boots. But the path ahead no longer feels threatening. Smoke rises from the chimney in a steady grey ribbon, climbing into the morning until it becomes part of the sky. And now, as you leave the cottage behind, your pace begins to slow. The lane opens gently before you. There is no hurry. Each step presses softly into new snow, and each print remains for a little while before the next fine flakes begin to soften its edges. Behind you, the fire glows. You do not need to see it. You know it is there. The kettle warms. The children stir. The old beams hold their quiet weight above the room. You carry the hearth's warmth beneath your coat, faint but steady, like one protected ember resting beneath ash. Your breathing becomes slower. The hedge loses its sharp outline. The white fields stretch outward beneath a calm grey sky, and the cottage becomes smaller with every step. Though its chimney smoke continues to rise, this storm has spent its anger. The road no longer asks anything from you. Your shoulders loosen. Your hands rest easily inside warm gloves. Even the cold becomes softer, touching your face without demanding that you turn away. You hear no voices now, only snow beneath your boots, only wind passing through bare branches, only the distant hush of a waking countryside. The cottage fades behind the hedge, but its quiet remains with you. A rough blanket, a low fire, a room full of sleeping breath. You let those images grow dim. The lane becomes pale light. The pale light becomes mist. The mist becomes nothing you need to follow. You are warm enough. You are sheltered enough. There's no work left for you tonight. No fire to guard. No latch to check. No storm to cross. You may simply rest. Let the last ember darken. Let the final sound soften. Let the cottage, the lane, and the winter morning drift gently away. and in the quiet that remains, you breathe once more, slowly and deeply, as the whole sleeping countryside settles around you in one long peaceful whisper, "Sweet dreams,